Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the June 26th meeting of the Thousand Oaks City Council. Can I have you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance. Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I have the city clerk please do the roll call?
Councilmember Fox?
Here.
Councilmember Price?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bill De La Pena is absent at this time. Mayor Irwin?
Here. Okay, item 4, request for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. Consent calendar item 7C, which is the Marriott Concession Services Agreement, and 7K will both be pulled off the agenda. And now is the time for special presentations. We are going to begin with a visit from one of our city's closest partners. It's always a pleasure to have a representative from the Conejo Recreation and Park District join us, and I would like to ask the Park District's Recreational Services, Administrator of Recreational Services, Director Karen Lindsay to join me. Hi, Karen. The month of July is designated National Park and Recreation Month. While with beautiful summer weather, there's no better time to celebrate National Park and Recreation Month. Park and recreation areas have been proven to improve physical and mental health and the well-being while contributing to the overall welfare of our residents. Karen, can you please tell us more about what the Park District has been accomplishing since you were last here?
Thank you, Mayor Irwin and members of the City Council. Each year, a representative from the district comes to the City Council in recognition of the national campaign, July is Parks and Recreation Month. Tonight, I am honored to be that person and would like to share a little bit about what's new with CRPD. Construction is just about complete at Del Prado Playfields. In about 1 month, the seating of the park begins, and the anticipated opening is November of 2012. CRPD launched its Facebook page in April. We hope each of you will like us to keep up to date on the Park District's happenings. In September, we opened the McRae Ranch Visitor Center. We have hosted movie nights, private tours, tea parties, and other special events to provide public access to this special piece of property. The Canal Valley Disc Golf Club hosted the first annual disc golf tournament at the Rabbit Flats course located at Thousand Oaks Community Center. Dos Vientos Community Center offered its first kids swap meet this spring and will be hosting the Great Canal Campout at the center August 11th and 12th. A new produce outreach program was initiated to provide additional food resources to the needy in our community. Twice a month, fresh produce and baked goods are distributed to the families at Canal Creek and those who live near Fiore Playfields. This program is a partnership between the district, Ventura County Food Share, and Panera Bread. Canal Theater for Everyone's Beauty and the Beast, featuring actors with and without disabilities working side by side, sold out all of its performances. The City and the Park District celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Global Senior Adult Center. The participation at the center continues to grow with about 800 activities offered each month. The Summer Concert Series kicked off Memorial Day weekend. The initial concert, sponsored by the City of Thousand Oaks, featured Fantastic Diamonds and attracted about 2,500 people. Upcoming is the July 4th Patriotic Concert. The Teen Center continues to provide meaningful activities for the youth in our community. Saturday, June 23rd, it hosted its first Health and Beauty Expo. Attendance at programs continues to be strong. In October, the unit will be conducting a session at the National Recreation and Park Association's annual conference, hosted this year in Anaheim. Teen Center staff will share their successful marketing and programming ideas with recreation professionals from across the country. This past year, the district received some special recognition. The therapeutic unit received Provider of the Year, Awesome and Autism Award from the Autism Society of Ventura County and recognition of its dedication to children with autism and their families. Teen Summer Musical Chicago won 6 awards, including Outstanding Production from the National Youth Arts. And the district is a finalist for the National Gold Medal Award for Excellence in the field of Park and Recreation Management. Recreation and community services represent the heart and soul of a community by providing safe places for children to play, learn, and be creative, by protecting natural and open space for future generations, by creating space for seniors to be active and healthy and continue their contributions to communities, and by positively affecting the local economy by boosting quality of life, property values, and spending. By providing programs that foster human development, promote health and wellness, and create lifetime memories. And by preventing crime and antisocial behavior, by engaging youth in positive alternatives for use of their leisure time. This community has benefited from the close relationship that has always existed between the city and the Park District. Working together, we have been able to create a community that is synonymous with quality of life. On behalf of the Park District, I would like to thank the city for your continued support of the Canal Recreation and Park District, and would ask that you join us in celebrating July as Park and Recreation Month, and remember that parks make life better. Thank you very much.
Can I have Pat Grant please join me? Welcome, Pat. Each year, the Conejo Las Virgenes Future Foundation Youth Leadership Representatives visit our council meeting to give us an update on their activities. This program provides local students the opportunity to experience a variety of government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and community groups. The Youth Leadership Program is a wonderful experience for local students. It helps them understand the value of becoming active in their communities. I would like to ask the Conejo Las Virgenes Future Foundation Youth Leadership Supervisor, Pat Grant, to tell us more.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll have to say that I am really not the chair this year. I have been in years past, but our chair was not available tonight. I am still on that committee and have been on that committee, I think, since 1993 when I joined the Future Foundation. I would first like to thank the City of Thousand Oaks for their support over the years. It's been absolutely wonderful and very, very positive, and the trustees of the board are just extremely grateful that the support that you have provided over the years. This is the 29th year of Youth Congress, and a couple of years ago we changed the format a little bit, where we no longer have one single meeting on a Saturday morning for our students and planning committee, but this year we have, and in 2 years past, we have met every other week on a Wednesday to go to different venues around the area so that our kids would get a feeling for what's happening out there in the communities and how the communities are contributing to the positive lifestyle in the Canal Valley. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our two students tonight, both from Westlake High School, both seniors, Vasant Iyer and Brian Chang. Come on up here, boys. And they will tell you what has happened in Youth Congress this year.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Vasant Iyer. I am a senior at Westlake High School, and I recently concluded my second year in the Future Foundation Youth Congress Leadership Program, and last year I served as its secretary. So the Youth Congress Leadership Program, sponsored by the Conejo Las Virgenes Future Foundation, recently concluded its third year. It replaced the Youth Congress program, which ran for 25 years. And the objective of this program is to help students learn more about their community and to encourage them to become active members of their cities so that they can more effectively provide input to those agencies that affect our lives. This year, we had 65 participants, and they had the amazing opportunity to visit various places and learn how each contributes to our community. Students came from grades 9 to 12 and included those from Agora, Calabasas, Oak Park, Lorena, Newbury Park, Thousand Oaks, Westlake, and Oaks Christian High Schools. Returning participants who had previously served 1 year had the opportunity to interview for officer positions. Our first meeting was held at the Civic Stars Plaza, where the president and CEO of the Hugo Bryan Youth Leadership Program came and spoke to us about leadership and the qualities that make a good leader. Our second meeting at the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Department in Calabasas was Deputy DeSantis and Deputy Rule talked to us about the police department and the various activities that it performs in order to make our lives safer. Our third program was held at the Four Seasons Hotel in Westlake Village. We had an exclusive tour of the hotel, and we learned about the behind-the-scenes operations of a five-star hotel, and we got an exclusive look into the job opportunities available in a hotel. At the following meeting, a representative from Toastmasters, a public speaking institution, came and spoke to us about the importance of effective public speaking and good leadership. The next meeting was held at California Lutheran University, also known as CLU. And we had a tour of the campus and a question and answer session with the campus experience coordinator and the director of undergraduate admissions. This was especially important to all of us because many of us were considering or applying for colleges, and so this gave us a lot of direction in our plans for the future. At this point, I would like to turn over the presentation to my colleague, Brian Chang.
Thank you, Vasant. Like Vasant, I too, my name is Brian Chang, and I'm also a rising senior at Westlake High School. This was also my second year at the Youth Congress, and I was also the co-chair this past year. So I'm going to continue with a couple more sessions that we had. So after Cal Lutheran University, we went to the Los Robles Hospital, where there were interactive presentations by the radiology, emergency, and surgical departments, giving us the opportunity to explore a multitude of professions in the medical field. At the next meeting, we learned all about Calabasas Parks and Recreation. Jeff Rubin, Director of Community Services, put together a program that included a bus tour of all the parks and recreation centers in Calabasas. The following venue was the Agura Hills Animal Shelter. Officials from the shelter took us through animal rescue processes and their care of abandoned, abused, and wild animals. And the next, here at the City of Thousand Oaks, presentations by Assistant City Manager Mark Watkins, Mayor Jackie Irwin, and analyst Rachel Wagner provided key insight into how the city is managed and how ordinances are created. In addition, the students also had an opportunity to debate an issue that had recently been before City Council. At each visit, the speakers gave us excellent information about how they worked within the community to bring about results and make our communities a great place to live. We also were informed about volunteer opportunities and had a chance to participate in question and answer sessions, which we really enjoyed and really gained lots of information from. We wrapped up our program with a meeting at the Oak Canyon Community Park in Oak Park, where the Kiwanis Club of Thousand Oaks prepared a delicious barbecue dinner that we enjoyed with our families. We'd like to thank all of the very important community leaders like you that took the time to meet with us. They all helped make the program a great success. Thank you.
Certainly sounds like an outstanding program, and these two young men, examples of the superior youth we have here in Thousand Oaks, not just Westlake High School. All right, for our third presentation this evening, I would like to ask Barbara Langley, John Smollis, and John Nelson to join me. Welcome. The City of Thousand Oaks has been fortunate to receive numerous awards that remind us that we truly do live in a premier city with state-of-the-art facilities. One of our recent awards has come from the California Water Environmental Association, an agency that has been California's leader in wastewater training and certification since 1927. Thousand Oaks was recognized for outstanding efforts in our wastewater division collection system. Tonight, we are very pleased to have Barbara Langley, California Water Environment Associate President, Wastewater Supervisor John Nelson, and Public Works Superintendent John Smollis here with us. And Barbara, can you please tell us more about the award? Sure.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager, and citizens of Thousand Oaks. It is a pleasure to be here tonight to honor the hard work, dedication, and achievements of the City of Thousand Oaks Public Works Wastewater Division in earning the Collection System of the Year Award from the California Water Environment Association, known as CWEA. CWEA is a nonprofit organization with more than 9,000 water professional members dedicated to support the environment and water quality industries. It was founded in 1927, and it is one of the biggest member associations of the Water Federation Association. It has 17 local sections. 7 are here in the southern part of California, and we have some of the strongest sections, which is the Tri-County section, which includes Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo, and we also have the Los Angeles Basin section, Santa Ana River section, and San Diego section, to name a few. The CWA goals are enhancing the education and effectiveness of wastewater professionals through training, certification, dissemination of technical information, and promotion of sound wastewater policies. CWEA promoted the awards program to acknowledge wastewater professionals and agencies for the excellent work they do in keeping our water clean. The City of Thousand Oaks competed with numerous agencies in all of California and was selected to be the top candidate for the following reasons. They have an excellent safety program with 0 lost time accidents in over 4 years. They have written safe job practices for equipments and tasks. They have written emergency response plan, standard operating procedures for spill and containment. They have an excellent training program, an employee development program, which includes job training, cross-training, succession training, and 90% of the wastewater staff are certified by CWEA. They also have an excellent preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance program. They have been using a paperless technology. I would like to congratulate the City of Thousand Oaks as a recipient of the 2011 Collection System Award.
For many years, the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza resident companies have offered our community world-class entertainment just minutes from their homes. For our last presentation this evening, we have with us Natalia Staniva, Executive Director of the New West Symphony, to tell us about their exciting upcoming season. And then she will be introducing a special guest. Good evening.
I'd like to thank the Mayor and the City Council for supporting New West Symphony as the resident company of the Civic Arts Plaza. As you know, in the last year and a half, we went through a very exciting transition. We were auditioning candidates for the music director position, and I am very delighted to announce that on May 24th of 2012, we made a final decision and offered a contract to Brazilian-born conductor Marcelo Laninger, who is also assistant conductor of Boston Symphony Orchestra, and he is now our permanent music director. We're very excited about the season. When we received the reviews from the audiences and musicians after Marcelo's performances, I was going through the letters, and the letters said the performances were mesmerizing, magical, transcending. One letter said, "I forgot to breathe." So the performances were phenomenal, and we plan on repeating it next season and opening the doors for all Thousand Oaks citizens to come to the symphony. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Marcelo Laninger, who will perform for us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. I would like to thank the mayor, council members, and the city manager for welcoming me to the city of Thousand Oaks. I'm thrilled and honored to be the New West Symphony's new music director. I'm eager to get to know the citizens of Thousand Oaks and to welcome all of you to our concerts. I look forward to working with the fine professional musicians of our orchestra to further the symphony's long tradition of presenting outstanding music performance to you. We have a fantastic season planned for you, featuring distinguished guest artists, symphonic masterpieces, and an inspired photo symphony, as well as Beethoven's monumental Ninth Symphony to finish our season, and much more. One thing that impressed me immediately about Thousand Oaks and the surrounding communities was your dedication to the arts, especially to the New West Symphony. As we move forward together, I know that the orchestra and I will have your support, and we need it. It is an exciting era for the New West Symphony, and if you have not signed up for subscription or tickets, please visit www.newwestsymphony.org. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much, and I hope to see you all every time we have a concert to this beautiful venue in our Symphony Hall here, and welcome you to attend our concerts. Thank you so much. If I may, to finish this, I would like to introduce you to a little bit of the music of my country and play for you just a very short piece by Heitor Villa-Lobos.
I think that on behalf of the council, we officially welcome the maestro to Thousand Oaks. We're very thrilled and excited to have him here for the New West Symphony, and it will be a thrilling season.
All right, can I have the clerk please call public comments?
This is the time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. Speakers for public hearings shall be called and heard during the public hearing. All remarks should be addressed to the council as a whole, and all documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. Under state law, public comment matters may not be considered by the council unless listed on the agenda, but may be referred to the city manager for administrative follow-up. 3 people have presented cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Our first speaker is Jian Li, and he will be followed by Russ Goodenough.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Attorney. My name is Dian Lei. I'm a resident of Newbury Park. I'm here on my capacity as the president of the Ventura County Bar Association. There's an urgent issue that's come before the courts of the Ventura County Superior Court, as well as affects all residents, including residents of Thousand Oaks. It's regarding the East County Courthouse located in Simi Valley. There's a proposal now because of the budget cuts from Sacramento, that courthouse is on the verge of being closed, which would be effective starting in July. But to try to create some solutions to try to prevent that from happening, the Supervisor Peter Foy, as well as supported by Supervisor Linda Parks, have put together a proposal with the help of the Simi Valley City Manager, Mike Siddell, to have all the cities in Ventura County contribute to help keep that courthouse open on a limited basis, like 2 or 3 days a week. What's needed is $275,000 annually to do that, and that would keep open traffic court, criminal arraignments, unlawful detainers, small claims, actions, restraining orders. So these are very important services to our residents, and otherwise they would have to go all the way to Ventura, and I calculated it would take at least 26 miles to get to the Ventura Courthouse, as opposed to only 17 miles to get to the Simi Valley Courthouse. So it's a much easier commute to get to court, and it saves our residents a lot of time and money, as well as small businesses who have to do actions such as collection actions and other types of cases. So far we've contacted all the cities through Mike Siddell of the Simi Valley City Manager's Office, who's been making this effort. And I want to just bring it to your attention. I'm hoping that it would be on the next agenda item for the July 10th meeting of the City Council of Thousand Oaks to consider it and hopefully make a vote on that, whether they can contribute. We've asked all the cities. Every city has contributed already and committed to the 2-year proposal. And just this morning, the County Board of Supervisors approved $100,000 for the same effort. So we're very close. The only cities left to make decisions that we're waiting for is the City of Thousand Oaks and the City of Oxnard. So to make this work, we need everyone's participation, or it just falls apart. So I'm hoping that the City Council will consider this proposal and will make an effort to help us save this courthouse that's vital to our community. Not just to the residents of the Canal Valley, but all other parts of the community will be affected, because in all parts of the county, because if all the cases are now transferred over to Ventura, that means that there'll be a huge backlog of cases, there'll be delay in processing all the cases, and just more lines, more traffic, and all other types of issues that arise from that. So I would request that it be on the next agenda item, if possible, for July 10th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here this evening. And the city manager will comment on public comments at the end of all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Russ Goodenough, and he will be followed by Nick Kidwai.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Goodenough.
My name is Russ Goodenough, and I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. My comments this evening regard the proliferation of massage parlors along Thousand Oaks Boulevard. About 20 years ago, I went to Dave Wilbranson, who's a property and business owner on the boulevard, and mentioned that the boulevard at that time was looking seedy and suggested we form a merchants association. The result was the West Boulevard Business Group, which was the forerunner of the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Association, or TOBA. This time my comments are addressed to you, and that the boulevard is starting to look seedy again, and it is the result of the massage parlors. I'm on the board of directors for TOBA and the management committee for the Boulevard Business Improvement District, or BID. And while TOBA has a concern with the massage parlors, I'm here on my own, not representing either entity. Often management of the massage stores is not local. The money does not stay in Thousand Oaks. The money multiplier effect benefits other cities. Some of the massage parlors appear legitimate. I counted 3 that might qualify. Most of the parlors appear gaudy and sleazy. Illegal window and street signs are prevalent. Most of the windows have the views inside totally blocked. What are they trying to hide? Some have rear entrances. Massage parlors are often fronts for prostitution and are a terrible representation for our city. Last night, my wife and I counted the number of storefronts offering massage on the boulevard, and the number is 18. 18. I have the results with me if the council members would like a copy. While some property owners may say that they help with occupancy rates, the price we pay as a community is way too high. These parlors will scare away legitimate businesses that may be looking to locate on the boulevard. This city has spent close to $1.5 million or more for studies, staff analysis, and boulevard improvements. Through taxation, the property owners on the boulevard have or will have spent over $500,000 for the specific plan preparation and the follow-up studies such as parking and mixed use that are currently in process. The property owners on TOBA and the BID have spent over 20 years. Is all that time and money to be wasted? As a citizen, I ask you, please, do what you can to eliminate this menace to the goals of TOBA and BID. Please do your utmost to preserve the fine reputation of Thousand Oaks. If we don't limit them, our city will lose in incalculable ways. Thank you very much. Would anybody like this copies of the survey?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Goodenough. And we'll have the city manager address you at the end of public comments. Our last speaker for public comments is Mr. Kidwai.
I begin in the name of God, who's most beneficial, most merciful, Nekek Bal Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, director, concerned citizens of Thousand Oaks, Honorable Mayor, City Council. I am glad that the issue of the massage parlors is being addressed again. I've been talking about the abuse for a year, and I was almost made fun of by people for being prude. And for the edification of residents, it was on the agenda at the last meeting, and unfortunately, there were no teeth in the ordinance that was proposed. And I asked the questions to address the issues of police surveillance, police coming in and checking people out, etc. Those are the issues that should have been handled, and the city attorney was not here at the last meeting, and she helped craft a good ordinance in Simi Valley. And unfortunately, I don't know, maybe she's still going through learning the ropes, that the better things were not proposed in this city. If TOTV will show, I tried to show this last time. was almost not readable. Now it's not readable again, but basically this is a grid of the salaries and perks of city council members, again in that great city of Simi Valley. It's on the website. And that's the thing, the reason people don't get involved over here is that I show it come up, it's not even addressed by any council member or staff member. Why can't we have that? I mean, I would also like to say that when comments are addressed, they should be tackled if the mistake is made. Wonderful conductor said just a few minutes ago, I want to play something from my country. What country? I mean, this is your country. I mean, you are working for the city as for the conductor, and you are talking about my country. This is our country. I'm an immigrant myself. I mean, you say the country I was born in, I was raised in. I mean, nobody on the council corrected him. I mean, and if that is his attitude, that he's going to go back to the old country, what is he going to contribute to this city? And these are the reasons that these theaters are failing, because we really don't have the camaraderie and the spirit to get people to go there. In fact, at the last council meeting, again, it was not addressed. We gave away a $60,000 organ or digitizer to a company in Vegas and kicked the company down the hill from us in Camarillo. I talked to them, Chad, he talked to me. They would be patrons for this chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. And can we have the city manager comment on speakers' issues?
Happy to. Madam Mayor, members of the council, essentially two subjects raised, well more, but two to comment on. On the East County Courthouse, as City Council knows, there has been an informal request for the cities to participate in. Perhaps it's been more formalized today at the Board of Supervisors meeting, and 2 cities have committed to put money in. 8 have yet to officially do so. This is a state problem. The state has serious budget challenges in front of it, and it is closing a number of facilities and operations throughout the state, and the East County Courthouse is one of those. Staff has made a formal request going back to June 1st for the data and supporting information that's behind the methodology that was used to come up with a funding request asked of each city. So it's June 26th. We haven't received that, but we'll take a look at it, and we'll go from there. As far as the massage parlors, the 2 speakers raised some issues that this city has taken very seriously. The council members have asked similar questions over the past several months. We've had worked very closely with the police department, and what we'll do, we've had a lot of success. We've actually reduced the number of massage businesses in this town significantly, and the number of individuals practicing. And it's not unique to Thousand Oaks. This type of business is taking place in most suburban communities. But what we would like to do, if the 2 speakers are inclined, we will follow up with them. We'll share copies of the reports that we've done, and Mark will make sure that we have copies of the report available on the city's website, so we can help get information out to the community to help you understand what the issue is and what we've done to date. And there are state laws and so on, too, that we have to comply with. So we'll follow up with those 2 speakers on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitnick. Item 7 is the consent calendar. Mr. Price, did you want to?
I would ask that 7Q be pulled. I'm unavailable to vote on that.
We'll vote on that one separately. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I was going to ask for item Q as well as items I and C. I understand that C is being continued. Is that...
item C is being continued, and so is item K.
Okay. The reason for item C being continued, do we know?
We'll ask our theaters director to explain it more completely.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. We actually had been in negotiations with Marriott, who is our current concessionaire, who had previously given notice of not wanting to renew their agreement. And we had been speaking with them about extending their agreement over the course of the summer. Well, we went out for a formal RFP process to secure the services of another concessionaire. Unfortunately, at the 11th hour, Marriott came forth with some requirements for the extension of the agreement, which were not in the best interest of the city. So we opted not to enter into the agreement to extend the concessionaire service.
Thank you for that clarification. I was going to have that pulled, but that explains it, and I'm glad that that happened. Thank you.
7I.
7I has to do with the amendments with tree elements and West Coast arborists. And that is, I just have a general question about RFPs, and I think these two companies are based in Orange County, if I'm not mistaken. And I was just wondering whether for the next RFP, if we could perhaps get someone locally. And does our preference point system work for this particular category as well as we do for, say, auto vehicle purchases?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, these amendments are for extensions to contracts that are already in place. These are on-call type contracts for tree trimming services that we use throughout the city. So the selection process was done a couple years ago. When these contracts are up, we will go out for a new RFP, and certainly we consider the location of the companies and their crews in our selection process. These are services type procurement, so I don't believe that like goods procurement, we can use the local preference. I don't believe that applies to this type of contract.
Okay, that's good to know. Perhaps we could make some changes to our policies, if possible. Thank you. And then you wanted to pull item Q.
Did you have a question on Q, or?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Price can't vote on it. That's why he was pulling it.
Yes. And my vote was needed in order to get this passed, and that's why I'm pulling it. I do have questions, and I spoke with Mr. Prescott earlier. I do have concerns regarding the parking ratio, and I understand that this is for the lakes, and the lakes is asking to go all restaurant, no retail, which changes the parking requirement significantly. We have already learned from speakers that there are parking problems during the peak dinner hours, especially in the handicapped section. I understand that minimum parking is being met according to state law and ADA, but it may not be enough. Once we have all restaurants at the lakes, we might run into serious problems. Now, with a shared parking provision in this contract, there is a mention of parking across the street from the lakes, which currently has signs posted all over that nobody is to park over there for theaters or anything else. And I was just wondering, how will that affect this particular parking problem? And it might be a good problem to have, parking issues, but we have to have a way to deal with that should it get to that point.
Yes, if I could respond, the shared parking that's in place vis-a-vis the lakes applies to the entire Civic Arts Plaza specific plan, which includes the City Hall and the theaters and the parking structure. So in terms of where somebody could legally park, if there was no space available in the parking lot behind the lakes, you would have street parking, and you would have the availability of parking in the parking structure itself through the shared parking agreement that covers the whole specific plan area. I think the properties across the street could be informally used by somebody who wanted to park closer, but as you pointed out, there are no parking signs there, and it's within the right of those property owners to say, no, you can't park here.
Regarding the Civic Arts Plaza parking structure, the City Hall parking structure, is there an agreement in place? And I think we have actually an agreement in place, but for charges to charge the developer for using our parking spaces?
I think there was an agreement for a period of time a number of years ago whereby they were, and I think this was approved, to allow them to use the top deck for employee parking, perhaps 5 or so years ago. I don't think that's in place now, but I defer to somebody from facilities to answer that question, but I do not believe that's happening now.
Well, if parking becomes an issue, and it would be a good problem to have, would it trigger also the clause in the development agreement with Caruso Affiliated to build a parking structure on the property, which I think is in phase 2 of the development agreement, which includes a movie theater and all kinds of other things, and the city is on the hook for more than $4 million for that, and so should it be built? I mean, I'm just wondering what...
No, that would not trigger that. The only thing that would trigger that agreement or that construction of the parking structure would be if Caruso actually wanted to build phase 2, which was a movie theater of 50,000 square feet. So nothing else would trigger it, and this change would not trigger it.
But that phase 2 is still in effect?
It was a phased project.
The contract is still valid?
Under the development agreement, yes. I'd need to kind of check to see whether any time periods have lapsed for people to make decisions under it or not. But to me, it's somewhat moot because I don't believe they have any intention to move forward with a movie theater, at least in the near future.
Okay. Well, I have, as I stated, serious concerns regarding parking. To me, the Plan B, should there be parking issues, is not adequately addressed in this contract and in the staff report that we have in the resolution, and therefore I will not be able to support this item Q.
All right. Mr. Mitnick, did you want to make comments?
Madam Mayor, members of council, on phase 2, we will double check and then confirm for the council, but I believe that's expired. So the ability to do a phase 2, it's gone, have to be resurrected and starting over, I believe. So we'll come back and confirm that.
All right. We have one speaker, Mr. Kidwai.
Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, Director Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks, Honorable Mayor. First of all, number C, which we discussed, the Marriott contract, First Amendment. I would like to again advise the council, even though there's talk going on between the city manager and Mr. Fox, that the working conditions or the participation for residents to the meetings is just horrible. There's not even drinking water available. And somebody should ask for an amendment to include a snack bar in the lobby during council and planning commission meetings. If not that, at least putting, and Marriott does that too, vending machines so that, and one council member loves to munch all the time, but I mean, and it makes me feel even hungrier. And I remember in this body when we were on Willow Road, we used to go to the employee lounge and sit there and eat. The meetings go on long, and that's just, if you want to be re-elected, I would hope that you would like to do that. Regarding the painting of the former City Hall, and canceling it, I don't know what's going on. I did not read the report, but I do know that the ugly, again, the conductor talked about the beautiful building. It would be a little bit more beautiful if the parking structure here was painted. And 3 years ago, it was approved for premier painting in Canoga Park. And because of the budget crisis, it was pulled back. And it's about time, Mr. Fox, that a priority should be given to at least paint this section that faces outward. 12 years is just way too much. And then with, the light show going on, you need to really go back to 5 minutes like it was for civilized societies. This ordinance for second reading on the parking. The big issue is not the parking, it's this whole thing is illegal according to the resolution of the redevelopment agencies AB 27 times 1, no changes to any contracts or taking money from the redevelopment agency since August of 2011. Right now, you have been denied $35 million of redevelopment enforceable obligations, and the state, as well as the state controller's office, is looking at that, looking at the purchase on the other side for $5 million as completely illegal, against the wishes of the people. And again, I would like to say to the city manager, who constantly talks about the state taking any money, there was no guarantee that the money for redevelopment was in perpetuity and unlimited.
Thank you, Mr. Kidway. We have one more speaker for item 7H, James Joyce. Good evening, Mr. Joyce.
Hello, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is James Joyce. I'm here as a representative for Assemblymember Das Williams to make a statement on behalf of item H. It is definitely our understanding that Senator Fran Pavley has requested the action of elected officials throughout the county to take action supporting a move against Assembly Bill 1778, sponsored by Assemblymember Das Williams. Just as you ponder that action, I'd urge you to consider a few quick things here. One of those things being that indeed the intent of SB 716 by Senator Wolk was to expand the use of local transit funds to provide necessary transit services to California's farm workers, which often go unmet with traditional public transit. That's just one of the issues. One of the other issues we would urge you to consider is that this issue, and understanding this has been an issue of quite contention, but the issue of contention right now has just been the use of local transit funds. What's their intended purpose? Transit, or should they be used for their de facto purpose, streets and roads? That latter part would all be predicated on the fact that of a finding of no unmet transit needs in the county that are reasonable to be met. By VCTC's own admission, Ventura County has less of a system than a series of standalone operators that provide widely disparate services throughout the county. And so there's definitely a question of whether there are truly any no unmet transit needs in the county that are reasonable to be met. Now, also with the added uncertainty of the Vista bus services, now more than ever, it needs to be clear that transit dollars should be used for their intended purpose, which is public transit. And so, therefore, they should be used for that purpose. If there is any question about the fact that there are definitely some unmet transit needs still left in the county, one need be reminded tomorrow evening from 5 to 6:30 in front of the Government Center, there will be a swell of grassroots folks from our community advocating to improve services to transit in the county. What I've left here for your review, as well as an op-ed that was published in Ventura County Star from the Assembly member on this issue, for those of you who may have not read that to date. And just to let you know, I'd be willing to stick around if you have any questions, and my contact information is available here as well. Thank you for your time. Have a great evening.
And thank you, Mr. Joyce. All right, if there's no objections, we are going to pull item 7Q. And can we have a motion for the remainder of the consent calendar?
I'll move the remainder of the consent calendar.
Vote, please.
The motion carries 4-0, and I'm going to read the ordinance title for item R. An ordinance amending the municipal code, repealing in entirety Title 5, Chapter 17, and adding Title 5, Chapter 17, adopting licensing and operating regulations for massage establishments, massage technicians, and practice of massage.
All right, we are moving on to public hearings. Item 8A, will the city clerk please open the public hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8A, the Lighting and Landscape Assessment District number 79-2, annual levy and annexation for fiscal year 2012-13. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing, and we have not received any public hearing cards.
All right, and can I have our staff member, Mr. Alicon, please provide the report?
Thank you, Mayor Irwin, members of the council. Tonight is the annual levy of assessments and annexation proceedings for the Lighting and Landscaping Assessment District. The action that council takes tonight goes a long way in making Thousand Oaks look the way it does. So all the landscaping that we see throughout the city really can fall within one of 6 categories. We have privately owned landscaping, which you'll find in front of most people's houses. We have HOA-maintained landscaping in gated communities and other residential developments. We have commercially maintained landscaping in shopping centers and other commercial areas. And then we have other government agency landscaping. Here's a photo of the Dos Vientos Community Center, maintained by the Canal Recreation and Park District. And then we have the general fund landscaping that's maintained by the city. And finally, we have landscaping maintained by the Lighting and Landscaping Assessment District. So while these last 2 categories are maintained by the city, it's really this last one that we levy assessments for and ballot for annexations. So how big is the Lighting and Landscaping Assessment District? Well, 40% of all the parcels within the city fall within the landscaping district. And for lighting, nearly all parcels within the city are in the lighting district. So the map that you see on the slide there, you'll see in blue are the parcels that are within the landscaping district, and it covers a pretty substantial portion of the city. So while many cities rely entirely on general fund for landscaping, which may take a backseat to other services, Thousand Oaks is really fortunate to have the Lighting and Landscaping Assessment District which has allowed us to maintain premier landscaping befitting of a premier city. So for fiscal year 2012-2013, lighting and landscaping assessment rates are proposed to be adjusted. For the average resident on the landscaping side, this comes out to about $12.59 per year, or roughly about $1 per month. And even for the residents at the max, the proposed adjustment is less than $3 per month. On the lighting side, we are proposing to adjust all parcels to the maximum assessed rate of $12.76, which represents a nominal increase of about 38 cents per year. So there are some proposed program changes for the fiscal year 2012-2013 year. One of those, which we'll go over now, is a reduction of the multifamily residential landscape assessment rate. What does that mean? Well, let's go over an example here. Zone 31, which covers most of the tracks near the corner of Avenida de los Arboles and Westlake Boulevard, has an assessment rate of nearly $75. In that zone, we have about 128 multifamily residential units and over 1,200 single-family residential homes. So assume along a 200-foot length of sidewalk, you could probably fit 20 multifamily residential units. Along that same length of 200-foot sidewalk, you might be able to fit 4 single-family residential homes. So while the landscaping and the cost to maintain that landscaping is rather similar for both those stretches of sidewalk, the collected assessments under the current formula are vastly different. So under the current formula, the apartment units are each assessed at the same rate as each one of the single-family residential homes. So to correct this, we are proposing a 25% reduction for multifamily residential units across the entire district. So in this case, it would represent an $18 decrease for the multifamily residential units and under a $2 increase for the single-family residential homes. So staff feels that the proposed 25% reduction reflects a more equitable share of the cost to each property owner and more commensurate with the benefit received. The second change that we propose for fiscal year 2012-13 are non-uniform adjustments. In previous years, we have raised assessments uniformly, meaning all zones are raised by the same percentage factor in any given year. However, over time, this approach tends to create zones with very healthy fund balances and some with repetitive deficits. So here's an example. Suppose we have two zones, Zone X and Zone Y. Going over Zone Y first, let's say that the actual cost to maintain that zone are actually much higher than the collected assessments in that zone. There's a budgetary gap, and traditionally that gap has been covered by ad valorem revenues. Conversely, let's say for Zone X that the actual costs to maintain that zone are actually less than the collected revenues in that particular zone. That gap is then a surplus which goes into the zone's fund balance. So in consideration of these trends, staff has proposed to adjust individual zones on an as-needed basis, and in some cases actually decrease assessments. So for the Lighting and Landscaping Assessment District, there are really two main sources of funding. The first one is assessments, which we are discussing now and which we are levying assessments for. And the second one is ad valorem revenues, which are part of the 1% property taxes levied by the county every year. So while assessments must be used in the zone that they're collected in, ad valorem revenues we have far more discrepancy with. So ad valorems can actually be used anywhere throughout the district, including general fund areas. In 1998, Council set the policy to use ad valorem revenues to reduce landscape assessments citywide. However, what we're seeing is that there is a disproportionate use of ad valorem funds by a few zones. So looking at the pie chart there on the slide, we notice that Zone 7, Zone 15A, Zone 24, and Zone 26, collectively these represent about 5% of all the EDUs throughout the entire district, yet they're using about 47% of the entire available ad valorem revenues. And what that does is it leaves the remaining 35 zones to share the 53% of the pie. So staff's effort to really create a more equitable use of ad valorem funds is really what's driving some of the proposed increases today. On the flip side of that, we have some zones which are proposed to actually have their landscape assessments reduced for 2012-2013. And all 6 zones really met 3 criteria. They, number 1, use no ad valorem subsidy. 2, require no fund reserves to balance their budgets. And 3, have at least 1 year's operating reserves in the zone's fund balance. So collectively, these 6 zones represent about 10% of the entire landscape assessment district. We did not perform annexations last year, and this year we have quite a diverse class of proposed annexations. To name a few, we have a 36-unit condominium development, 4 hotel properties, and various commercial buildings along Newberry Road and Venti Park Road. So that being said, recommendations by staff are to receive any additional ballots, close the public hearing after all speakers have been heard, and direct staff to tally those ballots. And staff will then return later in the meeting, at which time council can adopt resolutions to declare the result of the ballots, approve the engineer's report, and levy assessments for 2012-13. And with that, staff is available for questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Alicon? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. And it's just really a technical minor question. There is a revision in our supplemental packet, and I just wanted to find out exactly what the differences are between the two.
Sure. With the annexation proceedings, there are times or there are cases in the past when we've done annexations, we've done them on a per project basis. And this year has been slightly different in the sense that we've annexed or proposed to annex certain parcels in various portions of the city. So what that has done is it's been difficult to put these into groups, and we have decided to, if there is a majority protest tonight, we have decided to abandon the annexation altogether rather than to annex specific developments that voted in favor of the annexation. And that's what's causing the supplemental item tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no public testimony, so if the public has any additional remaining ballots, please present them to the city clerk. Prior to closing the public hearing, we will have one last call for ballots. Once the public hearing is closed, then no more ballots will be accepted. Right. The public hearing is now closed. The deputy city clerk will final the tabulation of the ballots in the city clerk department. While the ballots are being tabulated, we will continue with the agenda items and return to this item when the tabulation is complete. Thank you very much, Mr. Alakan. You did an excellent job this evening. We are on public hearing item 8B. Can I have the city clerk please open the testimony, the hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8B, inclusionary housing in lieu and non-residential development linkage fees. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing, and we have no speaker cards for this item.
All right, Mr. Bill Hatcher is going to be doing the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. We're here before you tonight for our annual update on the affordable housing fees and reporting to you on current market conditions. Normally we do a PowerPoint and bludgeon you with statistics, but out of deference to the fact you have the budget hearing right after us, we're not going to do that. And we'll keep the discussion a little bit more general and respond to specific inquiries. The two programs we're talking about are the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance and the Non-Residential Development Linkage Fee Program. And those are two of the components of an affordable housing ordinance that the council adopted in mid-2008. As a preface to adopting that ordinance, we did a fairly detailed analysis with a firm called Bay Area Economics in 2007, a firm that specializes in real estate economics. And part of that analysis was kind of the cornerstone that set the fees that were put in place in 2008. Now, when the council adopted the ordinance in 2008, we were already beginning to see a fairly significant shift in the marketplace. And so as part of that adoption, you conditioned us to come back on an annual basis and report to you on conditions in the market and to make recommendations on fee levels. And since that time, we've been coming before you since 2009. And since that time, we've basically held the fees in abeyance at zero. And so we're here before you again, and we're sort of basing our recommendation again to set the fees at zero given current market conditions. And I think, as everyone knows, the downturn has been extremely protracted and much more severe than any of us could have predicted in 2008. And even now, even though the recovery is officially 3 years old, I don't think very many people would concur with that prognosis. And so what we'd like to recommend to you is that we set the fees again at zero, but rather than do it for a one-year period, we would recommend doing it for 6 months. And in the intervening time, what we'd like to do is appropriate $30,000 from the Housing Trust Fund and use those monies to update the feasibility analysis that was done in 2008, because clearly all of the economics have shifted rather significantly. And I think maybe naively in the past, our hope had been that we would begin to see enough of a strength of recovery in the markets that we would be able to reinstate the fees at their prior level. And that's clear that that's not going to happen now. And so because those fees are based on proportionality, we can't come and recommend a partial fee reinstatement. We need to do a new analysis. And so what we would like to do is set the fees to zero for 6 months, do that analysis, come back before you before the end of the calendar year with the outcome of that analysis. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer specific questions.
Questions of staff? I have, why not wait a full year if it doesn't really look like there's a recovery, a strong enough recovery yet to put these fees back in?
Well, I think what we see is mixed signals in the economy. And it's important to remember that the fees were initially instated because the thought was that the redevelopment agency's ability to collect funding was going to terminate in 10 years. And 20% of that money was set aside for housing. Well, clearly with the actions of ABX 126 and the agency's dissolution in February, that source of funding, which was significant, has gone away. So, number one, it's important that we look at finding an alternative source of funds to continue the housing responsibilities that we assumed with the dissolution of the redevelopment agency. And also the second component of that is it's important also to remember that the fees are payable at the time of building permit. And so what we sort of anticipate is that when you begin to see a more meaningful recovery, you'll see an increase in development activity, and so those fees would be in place to begin to address those new developments as they came online. One item I didn't mention was that, you know, we normally report every year on the projects that are subject to the fee in the planning process. And this year we have 3, and 2 of them were on the list last year, the 2 commercial projects, and there's 1 new residential project of a 10-unit subdivision that's new. But clearly that shows that development activity is still fairly dormant. So the long answer to your question is that we're trying to be anticipatory, and also given the dissolution of the redevelopment agency, we feel it's important to try and look for alternative funding sources to replace those fees.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. Any other questions? No speakers? All right, then we're going to close the public hearing. Council discussion. Mr. Fox?
I'll move for the staff recommendation. I think staff has done a good job in looking at the fact that we really haven't looked at this issue from a detailed perspective since 2008. I think spending those housing funds for an in-depth evaluation and analysis of where the market is going and what we can do with respect to these fees, if anything, makes a lot of sense. 4 years, it'll probably be 5 by the time we actually deal with this in terms of the market and the cycle. Seems to make a lot of sense. So I'll move the staff recommendation.
Comments to the motion? Councilmember Bill de la Pena?
I will not be able to support the motion. I have in the past opposed eliminating the linkage fees. There are a couple of reasons. First of all, now with the elimination of the redevelopment agency, as was mentioned, we are losing a lot of money for our affordable housing projects, and not collecting any dollars to add to our trust fund, I think, is hurting our effort to improve affordable housing. Secondly, the commercial status. We have a high vacancy in terms of commercial space, office space, and I think we should concentrate on filling those first before we actually go out and build even more office and retail space. And I don't think that adding a minimum linkage fee would deter any developer to come in and build whatever he or she wants to build. So that is my reason behind not supporting this particular motion, but I do appreciate staff's effort to look into that. Thank you.
All right, vote please.
Motion carries 3-1. Councilmember Bill de la Pena dissenting.
And our last public hearing item is item C, re-adoption of fiscal year 2012-13 city operating and capital budget. And can I have the city clerk please open the hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8C, readoption of the fiscal year 2012-13 city operating and capital budget. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing, and all documents for the City Council should be presented to the City Clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. We have 2 speakers for this item, and each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes.
Mr. John Adams is going to be presenting the report.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Irwin, council members. Got actually a quick presentation, several slides. Tonight, the council is readopting the fiscal year 12-13 budget. As you know, we have a 2-year budget. Last June 2011, City Council adopted both years, 2011-12 and 2012-13. With significant changes on our budget, I'm asking Council tonight to readopt the fiscal year 12-13 budget. So quickly, I'm going to provide just a little bit of a history, a timeline of this budget. I'm going to provide you a overall budget summary for 12-13. I'm going to talk about the impacts that we've seen projected for 12-13. Staff has recommended solutions, and I'm going to show you a forecast for fiscal year 13-14 out to 15-16. So just a quick history. Council since 2007-8, actually in 2008, we started making adjustments, significant adjustments to our budget, specifically in the general fund and the library fund. So starting back in 2008, Council reduced the budget by $4 million, froze 11 positions. From fiscal years on, adjustments made both on staffing levels and on general fund budget. 2011, a total of 76 unfunded positions were in place by January 2011. We did adopt a budget last June 2011, and then tonight we're here to readopt the 2012-13. Just for summary, in starting, we had a $2.3 million gap projected for fiscal year 12-13. With that gap, there will be a total of 93 unfunded positions by July 2012. So just briefly, I show this graph quite often, specifically to the general fund. Shows you the 10-year comparison. General fund revenues peaked in 2007, and then from there, general fund revenues went down almost $11 million, down to $64 million. We had a small uptick last year, and it's been flat at least for the last 2 years. So the timeline for fiscal year 12-13. Redevelopment agency was eliminated effective February 1st. Council had their goal setting in the spring. We provided a mid-year budget update for fiscal year 11-12 in April. Also, staff was in negotiations with 2 of our bargaining units, SMA and TOMA, which tonight Council approved the MOUs and those agreements. Staff did revenue and expenditure analysis the last 3 months. Staff also met 3 times with the Finance Audit Committee to talk about the gaps, the strategies, and the recommendations to close the gap. And then tonight we're here to readopt the fiscal year 12-13 budget. So the summary, total budget that you're appropriating tonight is $166 million. The largest fund is the general fund at 40%, or $66.5 million. At the bottom, you have your 2 major enterprise funds, water and wastewater. One of the funds that is missing from this graph is the redevelopment agency. That was a little over $20 million. So back in June of 2011, your total budget was $186 million. The proposed tonight is $166 million. That citywide reduction is just over $20 million, and that mostly is the redevelopment agency. So these are the categories that you are spending or appropriating $166 million for. Really the 2 large categories, salary and benefits, citywide, $46.5 million, and law enforcement contract cost at $26.5. These are your 2 major categories within your appropriations. So just a summary on the budget. Revenues, $139 million. That's in operating. Your uses, 130 million operating expenditures, 25 million in capital, about 5 million debt service, 6 million in transfers out. So a total of 166. So really tonight, we're focusing on the general fund, the library fund, and the redevelopment impacts. The theater fund has challenges. The report that is after this budget presentation will talk about those challenges. We'll give you an update on the theater fund. I want to mention some of the other enterprise funds, water fund. Recently, the rate increases that will help ensure a sustainable budget in the near future for the water fund. And all the other funds, really minimal changes, mostly from just changes in payroll, but nothing significant. So let's talk impacts for 12-13. First impact, redevelopment agency elimination. Council was provided an update in April. The dollar cost or dollar impact of the general fund is $1.4 million for the general fund. Revenues were down compared to our projections back in June. That is mainly because of the VLF state takeaway, which was about $500,000. We did have some other reductions, but general fund revenue reductions from our original projections, about $670,000. And the library fund had some revenue reductions as well. Property tax was down, and also a state grant. So total gap for 12-13, $2.3 million. Briefly talked about redevelopment. The annual budget for 12-13 was going to be $20.5 million. Again, $1 million in direct staffing, $0.4 million in central service support. I can't really emphasize enough the millions of dollars that will be lost in capital projects. Certainly that number exceeds $50 million over the next 10 years. The other thing that will be impacted will be housing projects and low-income programs like the HAPS program. So here's the summary for the general fund. Again, VLF state takeaway, $0.6 million. The good news is sales tax related to our projections from June 2011 are flat, so no real changes in those projections. You can see the other changes, but together, $673,000 less in projected general fund revenue. All right, so library. Mentioned the state grant that is not anticipated. Property tax is also down for the library fund, and then fines and fees and interest earnings. So that summarizes the $2.3 million in reductions or gaps that we're going to have. So here are the recommended solutions. One of the things with the redevelopment agency is it really funded 7 full-time people. And with the reduction of the redevelopment agency, staff really looked at salary and benefits, specifically reductions in personnel. Total reductions in salary and benefits, $1.4 million. The other item, police contract rate, just based on rates that were approved by the county board earlier this year and rates that are anticipated next year, we will see a budget savings about $250,000. With the elimination of redevelopment, successor agency, we will receive an admin allowance about $250,000. We're showing $225,000 for staff. Then various M&O reductions, which I'll go through. Housing monitor reimbursement, $169,000, and then the community prosecution program. So let me go through each individual one. First one, salary and benefits, $1.4 million. In the report, I identify 11 positions. You've already taken action on 9 of those 11 positions. The total anticipated savings by eliminating those 11 positions for fiscal year 12-13 is $1.4 million. This will include a few layoffs. Some of the positions were vacant. A few of the employees were also transferred to other vacant positions. Police contract rate savings, I mentioned that, $251,000. Just to give you an idea on staffing, we talk about how staffing has been reduced over 15% since 2008. We originally had 597 positions. That was total positions, including public safety. We're down at 504, which is a reduction of 93 positions. Really looking at the 2 major funds, general fund, library, is where most of the reductions have occurred. This is just to show you by department. Again, 93 positions sorted by the percentage of change by department. Redevelopment agency was part of the community development department. They've had the largest percentage change in their staffing. They've lost 25 positions. The library has lost 20 positions, and you can see the numbers going down. With the position reductions, just tying that to revenues, the blue line is positions. You can see where we were roughly around, now this is general fund and library fund, a little around 480 positions, and now we're down at just over 375. But you can see revenue spiked in 07, 08, significant reductions down to 2010, and as revenues reduced, staffing needed to reduce. Limited resources, we need to reduce staff accordingly. General fund. This graph really shows you what the police contract costs have been related to our major revenue. The blue line is sales tax. Going back to 2004, it peaked in 2007, which it almost hit 30 million at 29.2 million. It hit a bottom 2 years ago at $21 million. But police contract costs in 2004 were just over 16 million. We're projecting police contract costs in 2013 to be just over 26 million. So police contract costs have increased every year since 2004. So a few more recommendations in depth. Successor agency reimbursement. The law that eliminated redevelopment agencies provided a $250,000 allowance for the successor agency to wind down the affairs of the redevelopment agency. And then there's the listing of various M&O reductions that make up the $200,000+. Number 5, housing monitoring reimbursement. We have several housing projects that are still needing to be reviewed, monitored by staff. It's going to be funded by two things. One, the property trust transfer fund from the county, and the other $93,000 for the housing trust fund. And then the community prosecution program, the savings anticipated for 12-13 is $55,000. That's based on a cap for $60,000 for next year for the program. In 2011, in June, we budgeted the program for $115,000. The cap was set, or is recommended tonight, at a cap of $60,000 for 2012-13, which would provide a savings of about $55,000. This one's a difficult one to read. I apologize. Let me move on. Just want to show you general fund, library fund, operating budget summary. This shows you what our operating expenditures were in 2003, 2004, $59 million. The blue is the salaries, the red is police costs, and then the green is M&O. You can see salaries were about 48%, police was about 29% of our general fund, library fund expenditures. We're looking at a $70 million operating budget for both those funds. Staff, or salary and benefits, is 46% of our revenues or expenditures, and police costs represent now 39% of our expenditures. And then M&O has also been reduced by down to 15%. So I think this graph really shows you how the appropriations that are being made by council, police costs have increased over the past 10 years. Quickly, this is what you are approving tonight: a general fund, library fund revenue budget of $73.1 million. Again, sales tax is the top revenue source for the general fund, and then property tax, and then intergovernmental is VLF. And then as far as expenditures, salary and benefits and police costs equal over 80%. Police costs is really salary and benefits for Thousand Oaks Police Department. Maintenance and operations and transfers out is 20%, but salary and benefits, police costs is really the people that are providing services both in the general fund, library fund. So tonight, what you have in front of you This shows you what the original budget was back in June of 2011. The readoption shows only a $500,000 reduction in revenues and expenditures, and again shows you that it is a balanced budget. At the bottom, you see that the operating gain or loss is 0. Just quickly on the forecasting for the general fund, library fund. This is the second year of our 2-year budget, but we're going to be starting the next 2-year cycle here in November. And we did some very basic forecasting for revenues. And here are our revenue forecasts over the next 3 years, going from 74.1 now up to 74.5, 76.3, and 78 million over the next 3 years. On the other hand, we're also projecting expenditures. And even though expenditures right now are at 74 million, we do project expenditures to go up to 76, 78.9, and then 81.8. When you put those two numbers together, what you're seeing is an operating structural deficit each year increasing. First year is $500,000, second year $1.5 million, and then in the third year $2.8 million. And this is what staff will start working on in November to come up with ways to either reduce expenditures or increase revenues. The goal is to have the operating gain or loss to be 0. At this point, in projecting out revenues and expenditures, both very conservative, we do have projected operating gaps over the next 3 years. So just for the upcoming budget calendar, we will, of course, continue to monitor revenues and expenditures. We will be back in front of council in October with the calendar for the next 2-year budget cycle. CIP study session will be in April of next year, operating study session in May, and then next June you will be adopting another 2-year budget. And so with that, I will end my presentation and be open for any questions by council.
We have questions of staff?
Do we have speaker cards also?
Yes, we have some speaker cards.
Okay. I'll hold my questions.
Anybody else? We have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Don Reynolds, and Mr. Reynolds will be followed by Nick Kidwai. Good evening, Mr. Reynolds.
Good evening. My name is Don Reynolds. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. I'm here this evening to voice a concern that I have based on the articles we've seen in the Star recently and the finance staff report on the details of your proposed budget cuts for the coming years. I'm a 42-year resident of Thousand Oaks, and I have been a volunteer in policing doing patrol duties for the past 12 years. The volunteer in policing program in Thousand Oaks is a premier organization, having been recognized in state and national conferences, and has been held up as an example of how citizens can benefit their community by being involved in police activities. Many communities have come to view our program as a guide to developing their own efforts in that regard, and I believe this program has won many accolades for the city of Thousand Oaks. Now for my concerns. The staff report indicates that the city will eliminate its position for special projects and program coordinator in order to meet its budget goals. While I fully understand the need for the city to remain fiscally sound, I must question this particular reduction. To begin with, I have a little history. The VIP program was initiated in the city in the early 1990s, mid-1990s, as a way to promote community-oriented policing, providing a means to get citizen involvement in the policing process. The city allocated a coordinator position to guide the organization of the program and establish policies and procedures together with the Sheriff's Department to get the program running. Initially, the program had only a handful of volunteers, which all helped to establish these policies and procedures consistent with the direction of the city coordinator and the Sheriff's Department. The city provided 2 donated patrol cars at the time to get the program on the road. Today, the BIP program is a great deal more than that. We have over 100 volunteers, we have 6 patrol cars, and we provide over 35,000 hours a year in patrol services. The scope of the program has expanded to provide more and more services for the city and continues to do so as budgets are further impacted. Throughout the existence of the volunteer and policing program, there has been a city employee leading and directing the effort of the volunteers. There is a continual change in policies and procedures as well as the addition of new efforts as programs evolve. These activities need to have a focus and coordination in order to keep the volunteer and policing program effective and true to the desires of the city. The elimination of the city's coordinator position does not seem to be consistent with maintaining an effective, well-coordinated, and premier program. It will also be inconsistent with other city volunteer groups that I believe all have city employee oversight. I therefore request that you reconsider the elimination of this position. Thank you for hearing my concerns. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Did you have a question?
Just, Mr. Reynolds, we looked at this issue extensively in our Finance Committee meeting. Chief Pentis is here, and we'll ask him to comment on the impacts of these recommendations. So let you know, virtually all the things that you raised were discussed at the Finance meeting.
All right, great. I'm eager to hear.
Very good.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Kidwai.
Nick Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, speaking as Director, Concerned Citizens, Thousand Oaks, Honorable Mayor. First of all, I'd like to draw your attention again. I thank the staff for including my info in the green packet on Thursday. The information on the budget was not available till 5 p.m. yesterday, and most people, since there's no updates during the weekend or Monday, practically speaking, not till this afternoon. So it's interesting that you meet the Brown Act requirement of 72 hours of posting, but this happens all the time, is that the information is not given till the last instance, and I don't know if we should really complain to the DA. And also, how can if it was not available to the council members, how can you make a good decision when you don't have enough time? I mean, it was talked about in Dr. Glancy's funeral how much he spent time reading the stuff, but if you don't have time, what is going on here? In fact, it was a disgrace that the Star exposed that the $1.7 billion budget at the county was approved in a fast 15 minutes. $1.7 billion. And what is happening is basically the elected officials are becoming just rubber stamps to the staff. That's what it is. And a lot of the issues are discussed behind closed doors, not in front of the public and not in front of the press. In fact, a lot of my steam has been blown out because a staff member talked to me for 45 minutes today and explained his position, and it made sense. So I'm not going to just keep fighting when the staff has good points. I would like to, TOTV please, to show my 30-30 plan, which I've been touting for a long time, and I'm hoping some of the council candidates will pick up on it, to cut back 30% on salaries above $150,000, to cut back on staff by 30%. That has already been achieved. I mean, people thought, originally we had the gimmickry of not funding positions and all that, but right now, since 2007, with the 90-plus positions that are lost, actually it's worse than 30%, and a 30% cut in perks. One of the things, I just cannot understand, this city always has spent money on frivolous things, experimental things, and behind you, Mayor, there was a whole wall which was supposed to be, where you could have presentations and spreadsheets. It did not work. And now we are stuck with, 40 to 8 inches TV screens for spreadsheets, which I have at my home. This is such a big hall. People can't read it. this is the highest priority. I mean, $160 million, and you cannot. I mean, I went to a church recently, and they had an automatic screen that was pulled down, came down automatically, and they showed things there. I mean, these are the fundamental things that needs to be done. TV, if you can show this. This is from your April, 2 months ago report, and it shows how flat-footed you were. Is that there would be 3 vacant positions, and the loss would be $1 million. And staff did not have a contingency position that your enforceable agreements with the state would be struck down, and you would have a $35 million hole. In fact, right now, like I mentioned earlier on under AB 26 times 1, you have 3 projects at stake, which should be and will be, God willing, struck down by the state. One is the purchase of 3 lots for about $5 million. Then you made the error of having to change the development agreement with Mr. Caruso. None of that is allowed since August of 2011. And Mr. Fox, the state is looking at it, I mean, very seriously. And in fact, some of the other cities, they put those in the enforceables, like Oxnard and Camarillo, and they were denied. But folks did not put it on the enforceables, thinking that nobody will, they will not find out. But they have found out, and they're looking at it. In fact, Governor Brown's office is also looking at it, because his whole plan of is not going anywhere because the money is not coming in. Mr. Price would like to see this. This is the crime in the San Fernando Valley from Chatsworth, Woodland Hills, all the way to Glendale. This is a week's crime that you can see in LA Times reports, from burglaries to homicides. And this city not getting rid of the crime task force, crime night, $10,000. These kind of things really need to be brought back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kidway. And just for your information, the Finance Committee, Mr. Fox and myself did meet, and we went thoroughly over the budget, and that meeting is open to the public. There was a reporter there. Do we have questions of staff? Mr. Fox?
Thank you. Chief, could you comment specifically on some of the items that Mr. Reynolds raised, as well as the conversation and discussions we had at the Finance Committee relative to your recommendations for your budget?
I'd be happy to, Council Member. One of the reasons we live in such a safe, great community is the partnership that we have with our citizens. And what takes that to the next level is our volunteer and policing program. And I appreciate Mr. Reynolds' caring, accurate, heartfelt comments, because I, too, was with the program when it started. I was a patrol sergeant in the early 90s. I watched the program grow, and I challenge anyone to find a better volunteer program in the state of California, if not the United States. It's just a critical part of making us safe. We've had to make some difficult financial decisions, and although I agree with all of what Mr. Reynolds said, there's only one correction. The position is not being eliminated. We are advertising, we'll contract out with a new position. We will have a coordinator working with the volunteer policing program, because it's too critical. And I, myself, and the assistant chief personally know 90% of our volunteers and have that type of relationship day in and day out, and we will not let that program slide. Very difficult financial decision. We will still have a coordinator, won't be eliminated.
So, Chief, just so, good explanation, but the question I asked at the committee meeting and the question I'm asking here, and just very straightforward, in your opinion, is the recommendations you're making with respect to this budget, will it have a negative impact on the VIP program in terms of what they do day in, day out?
I looked at this for almost a month and gave careful thought and analysis and looked at a 10-year history, and that was one of my primary concerns, and I know it was yours and Mayor Irwin's concern as well, and it will not impact the volunteer and policing program or the community that we serve.
All right, very good.
Any other questions? Councilmember Bill de la Pena?
Thank you. Actually, a question not for the police chief, but a different category, and that would be the city's relationship with the Park District and the Teen Center. Can staff elaborate on the funding for that?
I'll take a, let me just provide that. That was on slide 4. We made several reductions to M&O. As you know, we have a great partnership with Canal Rec and Park. We provide funding for multiple programs, including the Senior Center and the Teen Center. The arrangements with the Senior Center is that we provide the building and provide all the maintenance and upkeep for the building. Teen Center is a little bit different. We provide 100% of all operating costs for the Teen Center. So as part of this budget process, staff, myself, assistant city manager met with the general manager and their finance manager looking over that program budget, specifically the Teen Center budget. They're able to reduce on their side approximately $100,000. And when I say reduce, it's really a combination of two things. There are some expenditure reductions that they can make within the program, and there's some revenue enhancements that they can do for the program. So working with our partners, CRPD, they have incorporated in their budget the ability to reduce the net operating costs for the city of Thousand Oaks, and that's the $100,000.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Any more questions of staff? No? Then we are going to close the public hearing, and we're open for council discussion. Councilmember Fox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to move for the adoption of the revised budget as presented by staff. You don't have a recommendation page in this printout, do you? I didn't see that.
No, and I apologize. I can repeat the recommendation if you'd like.
All right, I got it here. That the council adopt the city's capital and operating budget for fiscal year 2012-2013, and also adopt the resolution eliminating the designated positions for 2012-2013 budget and authorizing severance for layoff of employees. One of the things for the public's consideration that you did not hear Mr. Adams say was the use of reserve funds. I think the staff did a good job of going through in very layman terms, very basic terms, where we are, going back all the way to 2004 to where we are today. And the reason why the city continues to do well financially and is stable financially is precisely what we've done here and what we've done the last several years. While other cities, which have been well documented in the press, use gimmicks, reserve funds, a variety of smoke and mirrors, we don't do that here in Thousand Oaks. When we say we have a balanced budget, we really actually have a balanced budget. If it requires an elimination of city positions, we eliminate city positions. If it requires going back and renegotiating existing employee contracts, we renegotiate the contracts. So we've done a variety of things that you don't need to be a municipal budget expert to see. You just need to watch what we've done, look at what we've done, and that is why we are in this financially stable position that we are. Now, that being said, it's obvious we make difficult choices. If you were at the last finance meeting, we had a discussion about very important programs to the city. You just heard a discussion regarding the VIPs. At the end of the day, our core services are to provide municipal services. We had an example tonight of a request essentially by another neighboring city to fund a state program. The courthouse, that's a state program. These are the type of things that all governmental agencies are running into because of what's going on at the national level, the state level, and here in the city. I think we've done a good job here in Thousand Oaks to keep our eye on the ball, so to speak, and concentrate on the issues that you expect us to deliver: municipal service, public safety, library, public works, and in fact this facility itself. So in recommending this budget to the council, these adjustments, I think it's important to clarify and identify what we've done and some of the things we're going to need to do in the future. One of the graphs that Mr. Adams pointed out if you looked at it, we're not out of the woods yet. Tax revenue, sales tax is flat, and that is the lion's share of how we provide certainly our operating budget. But I think the staff has done a very good job. I want to commend Mr. Mitnick and the staff for bringing, real recommendations and doing really a very, very good job of maintaining the stability of our city financially. So my thanks to Mr. Adams and Mr. Mitnick. I'm certainly going to move for approval.
Comments on the motion? Ms. Bilda-Lapena?
Thank you. Yes, I also would like to commend staff for having done thorough research as to making the critical decisions or proposals to the City Council as to what should be eliminated, what should not be eliminated. As was stated, this is still, it's not over, and we will have to revisit everything next year, and I'm sure there will be more changes to come. But I think that this proposal before us tonight is something that will keep us afloat for the next couple of years. Thank you. So I will approve the motion.
Councilmember Price.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say that this has been an education, to say the least, for me, being part of these budget discussions. And one thing that I will have to say is that I've been thoroughly impressed with Thousand Oaks staff and their ability to maintain a balanced budget year after year after year. And that's not done without making some very, very difficult decisions. But one of the charges of the council is that they be good shepherds of the people's money, and that going forward we continue to have a structurally balanced budget, even though, or even while the state continues to dip into our pockets. So we're having to make difficult decisions tonight, and based on what I've heard and what I've seen, I'm going to be in support of the motion as well.
Thank you, and my colleagues have basically stated everything again, but I do want to say once again, the staff has done an outstanding job. And can I have a vote, please?
Motion carries 4-0.
Department reports, 9A, update on cultural arts review plan recommendations, and our department report will be presented by Barry McComb, our Cultural Affairs Director. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the Council. I am here tonight actually representing the Cultural Affairs Commission and the Cultural Affairs Department to provide you with an update on the Arts Review Plan. Basically, we've divided our report into 4 sections, but first, just a little bit of brief background. In 2007, City Council directed the city to contract with an arts consultant to study and resolve arts and cultural issues. In early 2008, the City Council formed an ad hoc committee to review the consultant's final plan that he submitted, which consisted of 77 recommendations. That ad hoc committee held more than 30 stakeholder meetings with members of the community, and in June 2010, the City Council approved the formation of the Cultural Affairs Commission as well as the new Cultural Affairs Department. In March 2011, City Council adopted the ad hoc committee's recommendations for the final sections of the plan, and the written report that's in your packet gives an overview of the status that we've achieved in meeting many of those recommendations. Tonight we're going to focus on just some of the core recommendations that took place, and to start out, we'll receive an overview on activities of the Alliance for the Arts from Chairman Tom Cohen. Then John Adams will provide you with an overview of the current status of the Theater's Enterprise Fund. I'll provide you with an update on the plan as well as our recommendations to the Council this evening. And then finally, the Chair of the Cultural Affairs Commission will have some closing comments. So at this time, we'd like to call up Tom Cohen.
Good evening, Mayor Irwin, Council members. My name is Tom Cohen. I'm honored to be here as the chair for the Alliance for the Arts Board of Directors. A couple of my colleagues are here tonight. I just want to cover 4 items quickly. First, I want to say that we are so pleased to be working with Barry McComb. He's been an absolute joy. And the city leaders, we've had many meetings with Mr. Adams, Mr. Mitnick, and others. We view this partnership with the city very seriously. We view this partnership as being very strong, and we look forward to continuing to advance the arts in the city. The second item to discuss is despite the fundraising climate that we've been in for the last several years, the Alliance continues to strongly support the local nonprofit arts groups, the resident companies, and fund a very important program to me, the Kids in the Arts program. Our relationships with the resident companies have been strengthened. When the arts consultant report came out and suggested that the Alliance focus most of their attention on assisting through the grant program, the resident companies, we took that seriously and we took it a step further. We meet regularly with the resident companies, we share ideas, we support one another, and we evaluate opportunities for developing new programs that we think will ultimately help each organization. And the last point that I want to make is that the Alliance is working very hard right now to develop new and exciting programs for us to support. We've got some exciting events coming up later in the year that we'll be announcing in the next couple of months. So we look forward to all of you being involved in that with us as well. So with that, I have nothing more to offer or say, but I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Do we have questions for Mr. Cohen?
Thank you.
Guess not. All right. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Cohen, just for the public's benefit, I know it's in the staff report. Could you just very briefly go over in terms of dollars, how much the Alliance contributes to the city, either for programs or some other?
Absolutely. Going from memory, Councilmember Fox, the Alliance contributes $300,000 annually to the city for operations and maintenance. The Alliance contributes another $200,000 a year to the resident companies. There's three: the ballet, Cabrillo Musical Theater, and the Symphony, New West Symphony. And then the Alliance also funds the Kids in the Arts program. So we spend roughly $50,000 a year to cover the cost of busing as well as the tickets for the kids. And these kids are typically coming from Title I schools who would never have the opportunity to come see performing arts right here in our great city. So it's a great program.
So we're north of $500,000
annually. Yes,
annually. Very good. All right. Thanks very much.
You got it.
All right, well, I'm John Adams, the Finance Director for the City of Thousand Oaks. I'm going to provide really a brief overview of the Theater's Enterprise Fund. This presentation is very similar to the presentation I gave to the Commission last Wednesday, really just talking about sort of the history as far as finances and the current status of the Theater's Fund. This sort of sets the stage when Barry gets into discussing the policies related to the booking, fees, and everything else. So I have about 10 slides. I'll briefly go through them. Just for background, the Theater's Enterprise Fund is approximately a $4 million operation for fiscal year 11-12. They are expected or originally budgeted to receive about $3.7 million in revenue. Try to break up the revenue in the major categories. One of the largest single revenue sources is really the reimbursement for staff costs. We have theater staff that we charge performing groups for reimbursement. That's $1.2 million. Then there is the rental of the facilities, which is the rent here, also the facility fees. Box office charges, as Mr. Cohen mentioned, Alliance donates $300,000 directly to the theaters for operations. On the expenditure side, for this year, expenditures are significantly, I shouldn't say significantly, $600,000 higher than the budgeted revenues. Now, this is the time was budgeted, and I'll talk about where projections are in a second. But again, largest single expenditure, salary and benefits, almost 50%. At 1.9. Contract services includes everything from janitorial to central service support, utilities, repairs and maintenance. Again, $4,300,000. So this shows you a 10-year history of revenues and expenses, and I want you to focus on the bottom line, which is the reserves for the theater fund. Revenues and expenditures have increased over time. Revenues, as you see in the blue, had a spike in 2008. For City Council, that should be a relatively known year. That was when the Council had a top priority to ensure that the theater fund was self-sustaining. That included raising revenues in order to meet the expenditures. But for most of the time, expenses were higher than revenues. Certainly in the early 2000s, they did dip under revenues when we took a full cost recovery approach to the theaters. But unfortunately, with the decline in revenues, or decline in the economy, revenues declined. Expenditures have mainly stayed constant at about $4 million and are projected to be higher for 2012. But going back to the green line, that is reserves. And for the most part, prior to 2011, reserves were over $1 million. Over the last few years, they have declined. Based on current estimates, reserves for the theater fund will dip down to about $300,000 at the end of this fiscal year. So as far as being able to correct the ship and try to bring in revenues and expenditures, we're at that point. A little difficult to read, but I think that when you show actuals and actual numbers, I think where I'm really focusing on is the last two columns. Fiscal year 11-12 is the budget. That's what Council adopted back in June. We have projections as of May, currently what we call actuals. Right now we are projecting a deficit for the fund about $800,000. I certainly expect that number to change over the next few months. I will have a better number in September as we close our books. But originally the budget was $500,000. Council adopted a plan for the theater fund anticipating use of reserves because of the situation the theaters was in. Unfortunately, use of reserves will be higher than Council had anticipated last June. What's important is to look at fund balance, a little over $1 million at the start of the fiscal year. If we actually do use up $800,000, we will be just over $200,000, almost $300,000. So just to show you budget versus projected at this point, labor charges, I showed you we had revenues anticipated at $1.2 million. Right now we are projecting just under $1 million. Box office charges are on target. The other thing is rental of facilities, either the facility fee that we also charge or the rental rates. The two major revenues clearly under budget. Expenses, salary and benefit mostly are holding close, but you can see expenses on salary and benefits, which is one of the largest expenses, is just a little over budget. Contract services are going to be down, utilities are a little less. But overall, it's really the revenues that are driving the use of reserves. Just to show you attendance since 1994, certainly in the first year, attendance jumped up. We've been hovering clearly over 200, almost 250 in the Cavalier, but you can look over the last 3 years, especially since 2007, the declines. Fiscal year 10-11, which was the most completed, we were just over 160,000 in the Cavalier. The Forum, certainly not as big of a venue, but certainly over 50,000, now about 40,000. So it certainly declines in attendance. Number of shows, as you would expect, revenues go down, shows go down, or shows go down, revenues go down. Cavalier is in red, Forum is in the green. This is the combination of shows and attendance. As shows decline, attendance declines as well. Attendance is in red, shows are in blue. We really hit the bottom point in fiscal year 2011. These were projections that we showed you last year with increases, hopefully over the next few years with marketing and new attractions. That is, again, the hope as we move forward with the theaters. As you can imagine, as performances decline, revenues will decline. Again, in yellow is performances, and then revenues are blue. Revenues spiked in 2008. Performances were already declining prior to 2008, but continue to decline, and revenue with the decline in performances also declined. So that's my financial overview. I do want to make a comment. I think Barry will talk about it later. There is, in the budget we had presented earlier, does not make any amendments to the fiscal year 12-13 budget for the theaters department. Staff will be coming back to you hopefully at the end of July, if not the first meeting in September, to talk about restructuring fees, potentially making other actions on the budget. I think tonight the policies that council will consider and hopefully adopt will help us take that next step in looking at fees and budgets as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. McComb.
Thank you, John. As we move into the rest of the report, I thought it was important to start by discussing the process and community outreach that we conducted as part of our preparation of the report. All of the policies and recommendations that we'll be discussing tonight were fully reviewed and vetted by our Cultural Affairs Commission and several of its subcommittees. Staffs also met with and solicited feedback from the City Council's Cultural Arts Review Committee as well as the Finance and Audit Committee. We mailed out approximately 90 letters to rental users who are potentially impacted by the recommendations we're bringing forth tonight. We had a little over 30 people who attended a public forum that we held on June 20th as part of the Cultural Affairs Commission monthly meeting, and I think we had a good, healthy discussion where we heard some of their concerns and were able to clarify some of our intentions with the recommendations. And finally, I've also met with each of the resident organizations, our current resident organizations, to review the proposed resident arts organization policy. So beginning, the first part of the report I wanted to focus on is the resident arts organization policy. One of the key recommendations was for the Cultural Affairs Commission to develop a formal policy that governed how resident arts organizations were chosen and selected. As you're aware, we currently have 3 resident arts organizations, including Cabrillo Music Theater, the New West Symphony, and Pacific Festival Ballet. Under the proposed policy, the Cultural Affairs Commission will oversee the annual application process for organizations who are seeking the REO status. The benefits for companies which are granted that status will include a rental fee discount, priority booking for dates on the theater's calendar, donor wall space in the theaters, which will actually be part of the remodel of the lobby that will take place a year from this summer, and discounted office space in City Hall on a space available basis, and the key there is on a space available basis. The policy also, those organizations to qualify must present a minimum of 3 different productions each season and at least 5 public performances. Under the new policy, resident company status will be granted for a period of 3 years, and at the end of each 3-year period, those companies would need to reapply and go back through the application process. The other key here is that the city reserves the right to limit the number of resident arts organizations that we designate. Again, I think it's important to recognize that the Alliance for the Arts currently is supporting our present 3 resident companies with funding of $200,000 a year. The other real key portion of the plan talked about presenting programs. And I think it's important to note that one of the council's top priorities, not only for the coming year but for the current year, is obviously to increase the attendance at the theater, but also to enhance the variety of programming and to try to attract more popular and contemporary shows. As part of those efforts, we have developed what we're calling a booking priorities policy. And in developing this policy, we looked at similar policies that were in place at other theaters throughout the country and took the elements of those policies and developed what we're proposing to you tonight. Currently, there are no restrictions on the time frame within which our current rental users can reserve dates on the theater's calendar. There's a very high number of dates which are held by our nonprofit, civic, and school organizations, and what happens when they're reserving dates, in some cases, 2 or more years out, it makes it extremely difficult when we're trying to schedule the popular concert attractions and also national performing arts touring companies. The one kind of offshoot of having so many civic organizations that utilize the theater is that many of these groups require significant waivers and discounting of user fees in order to be able to afford the venues. And I'll talk about that in the following section of our report this evening. In order for us to meet the goals that are set for the programming at the theater, we believe that the Civic Arts Plaza Foundation, which is the in-house arm that presents programming such as Kobe Calais, the resident arts organizations, and our signature series events require priority booking privileges on the theater's calendar. And when I refer to signature series events, those are the Broadway series and the Distinguished Speakers series. The reason that it's important for those organizations is because of the time frame they have to commit to organizations in advance. What's in front of you here is kind of a snapshot of our calendar from March 2013 through June 2013 to just show you how busy the calendar already is. And just to kind of tell you what the color code is, the blue squares are performances or dates that are being held by the TOPAC Foundation. The kind of yellow-orange are the community and school events. The red are resident companies, so in April what you see there is the period being held by Cabrillo for their spring show. The green is our signature events, again, Theater League's Broadway series and the Distinguished Speakers. And then the gray, which you see down on the Chair Forum calendar, are actually the Planning Commission, City Council meetings held here, and also HR seminars that are held here. I think kind of a perfect example of why the use of the Cavalier from a community standpoint is really an event that took place this last weekend. We had a dance recital that booked 2 days. They rehearsed on Friday, held 2 shows on Saturday, and the combined 2 shows only drew 500 people. One show was under 200, and the other one was over. I think they averaged about 254 people per event. That's in an 1,800-seat theater. And although in this case where they did pay full rent, utilized our box office, when you're only drawing that number of people, it's costing us income in a lot of other ways, and certainly that's a community event which is better suited for here in the Forum than in the Cavalier Theater. So that being recent, that just really, I think, helped identify kind of the challenges that we're facing. So what we've done is to develop the booking procedures policy and establish different priorities of which groups have access to the calendar. For our in-house events by the foundation, basically there's no time frame to place those on the calendar. For our resident arts organizations and signature series, it's 3 years in advance. Again, when you're trying to tie into a Broadway tour, or in the case of the Symphony, where they're trying to commit to world-class special solo artists who will be performing with the Symphony, many times they need that 3-year period to ensure that they have the date that they need. For community groups and school groups presenting cultural events that require 3 or more days, they would have access to the calendar 12 months out. And one of the reasons it's important to schedule those types of events first is when you fill your calendar with a lot of single-day events, and then you have someone who comes along that needs multiple days, the calendar kind of gets cannibalized, and it's very difficult to find those windows to be able to offer access to those groups. So we would give multiple-day events higher priority, starting at 10 months. Then all other rental users and classes of events would have access. We would allow city departments hosting internal events, which is primarily our HR department who utilizes the forum. They would be able to place events on the calendar 3 months out. However, if we had a paying rental user wanting a date that they had, that would take priority over the in-house event. Moving on to co-promote and high fee deals. This is a program that the council actually adopted back in July of 2011. And it was instituted as an avenue for us to hopefully be able to attract commercial promoters to bring popular concerts to Thousand Oaks. And the basic premise of it is that it allows the Cultural Affairs Department to waive a portion of rent, ticket surcharges, or soft costs. And what that really means is that when even ourselves, when we bring in a contemporary performer, the margins of profit are very thin to be able to keep ticket prices low. So kind of a practice across the country is many times when you have a commercial promoter, the venue will share certain costs with that promoter to help them increase their profit margin and make it worth their time to take the risk in bringing that artist to the community. And that really was the basis for this program. The foundation presentations have benefited from these deal terms over the last year, but to date, no outside promoters have entered into one of these arrangements. However, I can tell you that I'm currently in discussions with a national promoter who's looking to bring an artist here in January, and we're talking about that happening potentially under these terms if the program is extended. From a foundation standpoint, this program's really allowed us to minimize our financial risk as we've taken on some of the popular shows. These are a few that took place this last year. Most recently, Lindsey Buckingham, of course, Bare Naked Ladies, Chris Isaak, and Kobe Calais. Our plan for the foundation as we move forward into the coming year would be to only take advantage of this program if it's an engagement where we're losing money. So in the case of these shows, we made a profit on all of them with the exception of Bare Naked Ladies. So if this were happening this year, we would take advantage of this program to help minimize our loss in Bare Naked Ladies, but we would not do that on the shows that are turning a profit. Moving forward to kind of the real core discussion tonight, and that's the city funding of theaters. Obviously, one of the citywide goals for the last couple of years here is for us to operate city government in a fiscally and managerially responsible and prudent manner. The Theaters Enterprise Fund has not required a subsidy from the general fund since fiscal year 2007-8. As John mentioned, this was accomplished really primarily by raising the user fees to try to increase income to cover what the general fund had been doing. Unfortunately, a consequence of this was that many of the local groups came forward and said, with these higher fees, we can't afford to utilize the venue. And one of the directions of the Arts Review report was to find ways to make the venues more affordable for community groups. Unfortunately, it's probably a bigger number than what we all thought it was going to be, and that's what this chart shows. We actually have gone back for the last 2 fiscal years to determine if the rental users of the theater had paid the rent as is printed on the rate card, paid labor fees, utilized our box office rather than doing their own ticketing, and paid facility fees, what would we have made compared to what we actually brought in? And the surprising number for us was, again, in fiscal year 10-11, it was almost $700,000 that basically was waived. This represents 69 groups that were benefits of these waivers. The average subsidy on a per-show basis, per-performance basis, was $2,247, and the average subsidy on a per-patron basis was $3.91. Looking at this current year, and this is not the total numbers to date, but as we last tallied it, we're at $556,000. We're anticipating that we'll probably wind up somewhere between $575,000 and $600,000 in fees that were waived this year. There's actually slightly fewer groups that have benefited. The average subsidy is down on a per-performance basis as it is on a per-patron basis. One of the programs that the council adopted when the plan recommendations were brought forward was the waiver of the supervisor's fee here in the Forum Theater to try to help groups using the smaller venue. As you can see in this year to date, it's been a waiver of over $60,000. When you look at what was waived in the previous year, there's been almost $100,000 waived just in that fee alone. I come back to John's chart because I think that this really represents the impact that these fee waivers have had on our revenue as well as eating away at our reserve fund. And as John said, if we can continue to move forward at the same level of assistance that the city's been providing, then we're going to run out of money at some point in the coming fiscal year. One of the things I've heard since my arrival 5 months ago was that the theaters here are very expensive. So one of the things that we did was to take a look at several similar-sized venues in close proximity to Thousand Oaks, and we took an actual show that took place in the Cavalier Theater, what the actual costs were based on number of hours and rental and box office fees, and then we took those numbers and utilized the rate cards for all of the other theaters. And what we found was certainly we're not the cheapest venue, but we're far from the most expensive. We really fall in the middle at an average cost per seat of $4.80. Surprisingly, the venue that you would probably say we're closest to is Cerritos because it's the same number of seats. It's a city-owned and operated venue. What sets us apart from them is that Cerritos actually gets a subsidy from the city of $3.7 million a year to operate their theater, and yet their rental rates are significantly higher than where we are here in Thousand Oaks. Going and looking at the Shear, we undertook a similar study, and again, we kind of fell in the middle, not quite as much distance between the low end and the high end, but I think the Shear is also a very cost-competitive venue. As John alluded to, one of the next things we'll be doing is taking a look at the theater's user fees and coming back to you at the end of July with some recommendations. One of the things we'll be looking at is if all the theater's users are paying what they should, can we actually come back to you with lower fees in some cases rather than having some people pay higher and more or less help subsidize those who are paying less. We recognized that in starting to phase out these discounts, that there will still be community groups that will have difficulty being able to continue to utilize the theaters. So one of our recommendations is to actually form an additional rent program, which we're referring to as the Theaters Rental Grants Program, and it's really there to offset rental fee expenses, not to underwrite costs such as labor, production, or box office fees. If you approve moving forward with this program, the Cultural Affairs Commission would oversee and administer it. We would also create several grant cycles throughout the year so that organizations wouldn't just have one time a year to come to us to apply for it. The grants would be awarded based on community benefit, the appropriateness to the venue, the feasibility of the event, and really key is collaboration with other organizations. We'd like to see more collaboration among the community organizations, so what limited dollars we do have to utilize to support these groups can actually be stretched farther. The grants program will be funded with monies which will draw from our Theaters Enterprise Fund, and although we haven't really set a budget yet, and part of that will be based on our analysis with user rental rates, but we're projecting it will probably fall someplace between $150,000 and $200,000. For those groups that do find our theaters are out of their financial ability, we also have identified other performance venues which are in close proximity to Thousand Oaks. We're not the only choice for people to go to. And as you'll see, there's a wide range of theater sizes. Agora Hills High School and also Calabasas will be opening brand new state-of-the-art performing arts centers around the first of this year. And part of their business plan is to rent those facilities to community groups. So if people aren't able to fit within our cost parameters here, there are other options for them in the community that they can turn to. Two things I want to just touch base on very quickly because they are cost related. One is the fiscal plan. The theater's facilities, after 18 years, and we've had over 5 million patrons come through our doors, they're starting to show their age. But even more so, our sound and lighting equipment needs to be upgraded to meet the current industry standards. we recognize that we can't look to the city's general fund to help us there. So our TOPAC Foundation, one of the things that they've done recently was to revise their mission statement. It used to be that the mission statement was strictly for presenting programs at the theater. We've actually expanded it now so that it can also provide operational support for the theaters as well as support the activities of the Cultural Affairs Commission. And what that really means is that through the foundation we can now go out and apply for grants to underwrite capital needs of the theater. And in the case of the commission, one of their high goals is to undertake the master cultural plan for the community, which probably has a price tag of around $150,000. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to find grant funding to start that process along rather than waiting till the city's general fund is at a position where it can help fund that. The last piece I wanted to touch base on was marketing. Marketing is obviously a key piece of our efforts to increase income. And one of the things that became very apparent to me when I came in not only talking to people from the community but also with agents is there's this perception that's built now that we're just a community venue, that we're not the regional performing arts venue that the founders had when they approved this facility. One of the very confusing things to me is we have two logos that we use when we advertise. It's very confusing to the customer. What do you call us? So as part of our marketing efforts, we're going to be launching a branding strategy that's going to develop a positioning statement for the theaters, how we want people to see us, develop a new logo that's going to combine all that together into one logo, and also a tagline that really reflects the type of programming that we have. We've also reallocated some of our monies to increase the budget for marketing the theaters to rental users, but even more so to the patrons. One of the things that the foundation has done, which is not a cost that the city carries, it's a cost that goes to the foundation, but we've actually hired the services of a media buyer who buys advertising for 18 other venues in Southern California, including the Greek Theater, Hollywood Bowl, Orange County Performing Arts Center. And the real benefit to us is that she buys over $12 million in advertising time each year. So the rates that she has available to her are far cheaper than what we would be able to get ourselves by approaching the stations. So it's going to allow us to take our very limited marketing dollars and really expand the reach of those dollars as we try to promote our shows. We're also researching grants through the foundation again to underwrite the development of a website, which would be very distinct from that of the city. So we would create a website strictly for the theater, would allow us to do a much better job of promoting the shows. And probably most important, we're now distributing 3 season brochures for periods of 4 months each, rather than just a single brochure each season. So this is going to allow us to do a better job of promoting shows which are added to the calendar throughout the year, and also get our message to over 200,000 households 3 times a year. So this brings us to our recommendations for the council. In support of our presenting programs, we're asking that you approve the guidelines and criteria for the designation of resident arts organizations. We're asking that you grant the current 3 organizations, Cabrillo Music Theater, the New West Symphony, and Pacific Festival Ballet, with continued resident company status through June 30th, 2015. So that would be for an initial period of 3 years. We're asking you to approve the booking procedures guidelines for the Kavli and Sheer Forum Theater, to approve the extension of the co-promote and high fee deal terms just through June 30th, 2013. In support of the city funding of theaters, we're asking for your approval to begin to phase out all of the user fee discounts and waivers beginning July 1st, unless their support extended through the Resident Arts Organization policy or the Alliance and the Cultural Affairs Department grant program. And finally, we're asking you to authorize the Cultural Affairs Commission to move forward in developing criteria and establishing a budget for the new Theaters Rental Grants program. The one final comment I guess I want to make is the key word in the discount phasing out is the word phasing out. We're not looking to go to community organizations and make drastic changes to them overnight. In fact, in a lot of cases, we have contracts in place now well through the first of the year. So this is actually an action that will probably take a couple of years before we fully realize the savings. So at this time, I would like to ask Jerry Miller, the chairperson of the Cultural Affairs Commission, to come up with some closing comments.
Thank you very much, Barry. Mayor Irwin, members of the council. 4 of my colleagues of the commission are also here tonight, and I rejoice in the support that we can bring to these recommendations. Over the past 5 months, the commission has given full coverage and attention to all of the issues that are being presented to you in these recommendations tonight. More recently, 2 meetings have been held just within the last month to address specifically the detail and the substance of the recommendations being brought forward. Members of the commission offered some modifications and suggestions, and these have been incorporated as well into the recommendations that Barry has already presented. Last Wednesday, in the second of these 2 major meetings devoted fully to the recommendations being presented to you, the Founders Room was filled with people, a dozen or more standing around the edges. And what impressed me most about that meeting last Wednesday was the spirit of the occasion. One might have expected a lot of discontent and lament about the challenges that we're facing at this time, financially and scheduling and all the rest. The opposite was true. People there were delighted, appreciative of being in this community and having these facilities as places in which they could perform and present music and the arts for this community. They anguished with us over the needs that are present before us to bring about some adjustments and changes. And they expressed concern about how they would be able, particularly some of the nonprofits, to raise the funds to be able to make presentations in the Cavalier and the Share Forum. But at the same time, what was most gratifying last Wednesday evening was the experience of togetherness in this cause, and that they were ready and able to address with their own organizations the same kinds of concerns that you and we are addressing here this night. The Cultural Affairs Commission, both at its meeting on June 6th and then again last June 20th, took action to approve all the recommendations that are presented to you tonight and endorse this presentation to the council as Barry has so well expressed it. In closing, on a personal note, I would like to commend to you the work of Barry McComb, our Director of the Cultural Affairs Department. The way that he has embraced cultural affairs and indeed the full realm of cultural arts here in our community in these last 5 months that he's been with us has been astonishing. Not only has he been concerned about what's happening in these 2 theaters, but he also has embraced the full realm of cultural life in our community. And it's been impressive, I think, to all of us as commission members, and I certainly would express it for myself, that in less than 5 months, he has brought leadership, he has brought vision, he has brought candor, and he has brought proposals that I think will be for the good of cultural affairs for many years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Was that the wrap-up?
That is the conclusion of our report.
Boy, that was very, very meaty. Outstanding job. Do we have questions for staff? Councilmember?
Yes, question for staff. My question is, the recommendation by the commission, was it unanimous? It sounded that it was.
It was. There was one member who had to recuse herself, but the members of the commission that voted it was unanimous.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fox?
Not so much a question. Do we have the speaker cards?
Yes.
All right, then let's hear from the speakers.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of questions first. Just on the presentation, for the, do you foresee that we would have more than 3 resident arts organizations?
It's certainly possible. We are concerned of not having, similar, 2 symphony orchestras, 2 ballet companies, 2 musical theater organizations. But with the 2 theaters, it is possible that you might have one wrestling company in the Cavalier and a smaller wrestling company based performing in the Shear.
Okay, and then I guess I just want a little bit of clarification on the for the booking policy. If you had a program like that was sold out last year, TEDx, and where does that fall under the booking policy?
TEDx is actually a multiple-day event, so they would fall under the 12-month window. However, one of the things that the Cultural Affairs Commission did was they added a element to the booking policy that would provide local nonprofits and school organizations, when I say local in the Conejo Valley, with booking priority whenever possible. So for the case of like the All District Music Festival, through the school district, the TEDx, those events which have long-term history with us that the city has close partnerships with, that have strong financial support from the community, we would certainly be working very closely with them, especially in the case of the All District Music Festival. They have to schedule that around their school schedule. And testing and things like that. So in that case, they will require a longer period than the 12-month window, and will accommodate that.
Okay, and then you were giving the example of the ballet company that could have used this theater instead of the other one. How would the booking policy have changed that?
One is, by having other organizations have priority before that, because we're saying 3 or more days, and that's a 2-day event, so they wouldn't have come into play till after that.
So really, they would have had the 10-month.
They would have had the 10-month, and really in those cases, one of the things that we'll be doing as a staff is really looking at the attendance that different events are attracting, and then we'll be reaching out to each of those individual companies, and in like the case of this, we'll suggest that they move to the forum, which will actually be much more cost-effective for them as well. So I think it can actually be a win-win for both. We'll open up some dates on the Cavalier Theater calendar, and at the same time provide them with a more cost-affordable option.
But certainly that company was paying full price, so they could have encouraged them, but not necessarily. I mean, as long as they're within the booking policy. And okay.
Correct.
And then my last question was on the fee comparison charts. Are those fees including the subsidies or not? I couldn't.
No, those don't take into play any subsidy that's provided by each particular venue. It's basically taking the cost to put on the same show at each theater based on the rental rates that they would charge a commercial promoter coming in.
And we do have some speakers, but I want to say ahead of time, outstanding job. This was and very, very thorough by you, Mr. McComb. All right, we have 3 speakers. Our first speaker is Stephanie Wilson. Ms. Wilson will be followed by Jerry Miller.
Mayor Irwin, members of the City Council, and very hardworking staff. I am proud to serve. I'm Stephanie Wilson, resident of Westlake Village for 20 years. I'm proud to serve on the Cultural Affairs Commission, but I'm also really good at recusing myself and speaking as an individual. So tonight I'm here as an individual and not in any official capacity. I have a long and passionate relationship with this building. I am the artistic director for Gold Coast Theater Conservatory, and my students were the first children to ever perform on this stage in January of 1995 in our town. So I often have to recuse myself because I work with the New West Symphony, Cabrillo Music Theater, Young Artists Ensemble, and my own company, as well as dozens of other organizations, and it's my pleasure to be doing that. I have to say thank you. I am really appreciative that when I came to Mr. Mitnick many years ago asking if we could do a cultural report and a plan for the city, he looked at the spaghetti of organizations and said, whoa, 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 whoa. And he hired very smart professionals to come in. They listened to us. I want to thank you for listening to them. I would like to thank you for firing the Arts Commission and the Board of Governors. That was the best firing I've ever had. And hiring Mr. McComb. He's amazing. I have drilled him both as a Cultural Affairs Commissioner and as an individual about every single issue in here because I'm always speaking for the resident companies. I sat on Mr. Fox's commission in 1997 that changed the way the Community Events Endowment Fund worked to fund more arts programs. And so I'm really passionate about our arts organizations, and I put him through the ringer. He works on Sundays. Do you know this about him? He actually returns calls from his office on Sundays. So I think that it's really good news ahead of us. We have rolled up our sleeves and created new programs, new policies, new resident companies, new policies for those resident companies. The Cultural Affairs Commission is on track. All of that work and all of that money was very well spent. The arts report was brutal, but it's working, and we're on the right track. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for him. Thank you for creating this new plan for us to do our work. We all sit there, both the resident companies and the community groups and the Cultural Affairs Commission. We work hard. We pound the table. We have heated, good discussions. But at the end of the day, things are good. Things are better. I know it looked bleak up there with those dollars, but things are better. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Jerry Miller.
I'm Jerry Miller, Mayor Irwin, members of the council. I put in a speaker's card because I thought that's what I needed to do in order to support the recommendations. But being on my feet, I imagine you can guess who it was that recused herself from voting last Wednesday. But in addition to Stephanie tonight, Bob Beery, John Bradley, Eloise Cohen, other members of the commission are also here tonight. Again, we appreciate your attention to this matter and encourage your support in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And Mr. Kidwai?
Nick Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, and a striving artist, I guess. First of all, the Alliance used to give $1 million checks, and now it's gone down to $500,000. And the real goal and charge of the Alliance was that there should be no subsidy from the taxpayers, not whether it's $1 million or $1.5 million, and that has completely disappeared. The interesting thing is that the director sounds very good, and I'm glad that he works on Sundays, but the last place he worked, as soon as he left, it closed. And the Alex Theater in Glendale was heavily subsidized. And this is a pipe dream that this city has been trying to sell for 30 years, that you can have theaters like this and no subsidy. So really, the people sitting on the dais should wake up. And in fact, there's $2.1 million in the Dos Vientos Fund last time I checked, that you should establish an endowment and be serious about supporting the theaters before it goes bankrupt and is closed. It is true that the people said we need a place, but they also said we do not want general funds or taxpayer funds spent on it. And it's very sad that to this day, and I would like to read Opie, that sage, from the Ventura County Star. He gave 10 priorities, and his number 10th was, and I quote, each and every sitting council member should get down on their knees, pray to God, and ask for forgiveness. Apologize to all the residents for acting in bad faith with arrogance and for squandering the taxpayers' hard-earned money. I don't like the last line. He said, then they each should resign. That's Opie. He also said, free the copper curtain, allow the artist that created it to restore his original intent, allow it to develop a patina, sway in the breeze, light it correctly, and remove that ridiculous and embarrassing sign above it. I think I have time for one more of Opie's comments. Number 3, remove the horrible Soviet-style lighting and allow the cheap and crappy fancy boy lights they wasted so much money on to at least have a chance to shine. I mean, this is the old-timers, the son of the soils people feelings. And so long as you do not get people involved and feel that it's a regional center, and I said again, I mean, you bought a $60,000 digital box from Vegas instead of from Cameo. I mean, these kind of things are just a prescription for disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. And we have one speaker card in full support of the recommendation. All right. Councilmember Bill de la Pena.
Thank you. I have a question before I would like to move the staff recommendation. You mentioned, Mr. McComb, that some groups don't even use the box office for their tickets. And is that something that will be looked at?
Actually, it's something that needs to be changed. Not allowing or not requiring all users to utilize the box office right now is actually in breach of our contract with our current ticket provider. So one of the first things that we'll be implementing with all rental users is that they must utilize our box office. And even beyond whether it's required or not, anytime we have a show where someone's printing tickets on their own, it's almost a guarantee that they're going to be tickets for seats that don't exist. And then that reflects poorly on the theater, not on the rental company coming in. So kind of box office 101 among performing arts centers is that the theater always prints the tickets that are distributed for performances at the theater.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that that will be worked on, but I also have to echo my colleagues' comments regarding the outstanding work that has been done in trying to make sense of all of this. A labyrinth, basically, is what it was. And in a short period of time, you have been able to basically take the bull by the horn and just really try to show leadership. So that is very appreciated. It is, of course, lamentable that we cannot support at this point the arts, because in order for the arts to flourish, subsidies have to be given. But in these in this difficult economic climate, that's basically impossible to do, unfortunately. But I moved staff recommendation, all three of them, or is it all? Yeah. A through 1, 2, 3, as well as 4 and 5.
Comments to the motion? Councilmember Fox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, this is one of the council meetings where I hope our retired council member, Mr. Gillette, is watching, because I know he would share both my and the rest of the council's pleasure in where we've gotten today. Mr. Mitnick reminded me that we started this journey almost 7 years ago when we asked Mr. Mitnick to, what Stephanie commented on is we need to get our arms around the arts in its entirety with respect to our community. And that was a difficult task. I think next to the mobile home issue, that probably was one of the most difficult tasks that the council has dealt with in many, many years. It had political risks, it had financial risks, it had civic risks, because you're dealing predominantly with volunteers. And I think this evening we're now starting to see some of the benefits and some of the successes that we knew with respect to our vision were out there, but we needed to go through processes and sometimes many, many meetings and roll up our sleeves in a lot of labor-intensive meetings to get where we are today. And certainly Mr. McComb has been part of that. I cannot tell you, Dr. Miller and the other members of the commission, just literally a grand slam in appointing the people that we appointed to the commission. Stephanie's kind of humorous firing some commissions to put, that was not an easy task. In fact, there are people here that sat on some of those committees. And so I don't know about the language, but the reality is we needed to consolidate, and we needed to do what we've done, so to speak. And so I just want to thank everybody that's involved. The commission is already in your early tenure, you're adding value to what we're doing here in the city. And so I think you guys are doing a great job. There is some heavy lifting that needs to be done. But in contrast to my comments earlier about the budget, As Mr. Adams walked through the budget, you saw that we actually have used reserves in order to keep the theater's operations working. And we did that in part with the expectation that maybe the economy will turn around. It clearly is not going to turn around in a time and a fashion that we can continue to absorb those kinds of losses. And so that's why we have this report today. It is, again, very easy to follow. We need to make some difficult decisions, and one of those decisions is going to be a part of this booking policy. But I'm very pleased to hear that we used a very inclusive process. Everybody understands the difficulty that we're under, and I think as we move forward, we're going to have a much more successful theater operation. So I'm certainly going to support the motion. Good job. And we're not paying FLSA for Sunday work, by the way.
I'm also going to support the recommendation. I want to thank also our former colleague Dennis Gillette and Andy Fox. They really tackled a very difficult issue and spent an awful lot of time going through the consultants report, working with all the different groups. The Cultural Affairs Commission, great job also, and the Alliance for the Arts. You guys are critical in supporting the arts in our community. And once more, I'll say a very excellent job. And with that, we will vote.
Motion carries 4-0.
And why don't we take a 15-minute break right now? All right, the city attorney has something to report out.
Yes, returning from closed session, the authorization to initiate litigation has been approved. The specifics regarding the action and defendants shall once commenced be disclosed upon inquiry.
Thank you, Ms. Noonan. And on item 8A, can I have the city clerk please provide the results of the tabulation?
Thank you, Mayor. The results are as follows. The ballots cast for the district are as follows. Yes, in the amount of $6,259.75, and no in the amount of $2,697.35. So the ballots are in favor of the assessment and annexation.
We need a motion in order to approve recommendations 3, 4, 5. How about I'll make it a motion to approve recommendations 3, 4, 5, 6A as outlined in the supplemental packet. Vote, please.
The motion carries 4-0.
We are on item 9B, preparation of impact analysis report for proposed initiative requiring city council vacancies to be filled by special election. Can I have city clerk please provide the report?
Thank you, Mayor. Some background on the initiative entitled the Thousand Oaks Right to Vote. The notice of intent to circulate was filed by the proponents on March 8th of 2012. The ballot title and summary was prepared and provided to the proponents on March 23rd. The ballot title is an initiative requiring city council vacancies be filled by special election, and the initiative imposes a requirement that all vacancies of the City Council be filled by immediately calling for a special election. The special election shall be held at the next regularly established election date, not less than 114 days from the call of the special election. The initiative also authorizes the City Council to make an interim appointment to fill the vacancy, with the term of the interim appointment ending on the date of the special election. The petitions were circulated and submitted on June 11th, containing approximately 10,421 signatures. 7,279 verified signatures are required in order to deem the petition sufficient to place the measure on the ballot for a regular election. The petitions were delivered to the Ventura County Elections Division on the same day that we accepted the petitions. And state law requires that the examination of the signatures be completed within 30 working days, which excludes weekends and holidays, from the date of filing. And then following the certification by the county clerk, and if the signatures are deemed sufficient, staff will return to council with election implementation options. Presenting of the certification results are required to be done at a regular meeting of the City Council pursuant to the Elections Code. Additionally, August 10th is the deadline to place a measure on the ballot, which is not less than 88 days after the date of the order of election. July 24th, therefore, is the last regular meeting prior to the summer recess in order to meet that August 10th deadline for council to take action to place the measure on the ballot if that is the option that the City Council selects. Staff has been advised that the county clerk is working toward completing their work so that we can agendize the matter for July 24th. Under the Elections Code, the council can order an impact analysis report, and if council decides to order the report, it needs to be completed and presented to the council no later than 30 days after the city clerk certifies to the sufficiency of the petition. Given the time constraints, it's unlikely that the initiative could be placed on the November ballot if an initiative impact analysis report is considered at a subsequent meeting. Working under the assumption that the petition will be deemed sufficient, it's recommended that if City Council desires an impact analysis report, that staff be directed to prepare the report and bring it forward to council with the certification of the petition. California Elections Code 9212 outlines the options to include in an analysis report, and that those categories are outlined in attachment 2 of your staff report, page 130 in the agenda packet, and I won't go through all of them. But staff is recommending that council direct staff to prepare an impact analysis report to provide information on the potential impacts of requiring council vacancies be filled by special election. In reviewing the initiative, it's believed that the report can be prepared by city staff, primarily in the city clerk department, and one of the areas that we would report on would be the fiscal impact. For example, the various costs involved for the timing of when a special election would need to take place, like a standalone election, consolidated election. And then council can direct us on any other information that they would like us to provide. So staff is available for questions and direction on the matter.
Questions of staff? Councilmember Bill De La Pena.
Thank you. Provided that the signatures will be certified and it will be on the agenda for July 24th, will the council be presented with options whether to put it on the ballot or to actually enact it that very night?
Yes. We'll bring a report forward that provides all the options in the Elections Code, which is adopting the ordinance as is, placing it on the ballot, and the other option is to do the impact analysis report that we're recommending, if you want one, to direct us to do that tonight.
Thank you.
So does the impact analysis also look at what surrounding cities or what other cities in the county are doing? Would that be part of it?
If council so directs for us to include that type of information, certainly.
I would be curious to see that type of information, and so you'll look at the different scenarios, how long possibly the seat would stay open, depending on what time of year this resignation might take place.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Like, what the longest period of time is before an election. What is it? See, I'm looking at, like, what is the longest, this year we had 2 council members resign. What is the longest period of time that you would be operating without a full council?
It depends on the timing of the vacancy, and yeah, that would be part of the impact analysis report. There's certain
that's
election dates that are outlined in the elections code where you have to have elections. So we would provide information on those election dates and various scenarios of what the costs would be and perhaps a time frame, depending on the timing of the vacancy and the dates of the election that we can hold them on.
All right, and then, I'm looking at, like, this evening, there's something that we weren't able to vote on because we don't have a full council item, one of the consent calendar items. So, I mean, do you look at also potentially other costs of operating a council with, let's say, 3 or 4 people? Are there any potential legal liabilities that if decisions can't be made, or those type of costs?
You can direct any information that you want us to investigate, and we would research that.
Well, I would be curious about what other potential costs there are just besides the election costs. Anybody else have? No. All right.
Yeah, I don't know whether I had a question. I think I'd probably have more questions after an impact analysis was done than I do now. But am I correct that elections are typically in March, June, and November?
There are established election dates in April of even-numbered years, March of odd-numbered years, June of each year, November of each year. So.
Thank you.
So we can direct anything, if you have any direction right now, anything else that you want as part of the impact report, assuming that you want.
I guess my question would be of the city attorney is whether or not we need to give any direction here in public or whether that can be done at a later time.
No, what the purpose of tonight is, again, on page 130 of the staff report identifies the different the general things that we would look at in an impact report. The last one is any other matters that you're interested in too. Mayor Irwin has indicated, in addition to the fiscal impact, she's interested in the impact analysis report, also including what other cities are doing, the possible length of a vacant seat depending on when the vacancy occurs, and other impacts or management impacts based on a vacancy on the city council. So if there's any other impacts or any other type of analysis you'd like to review, and then tonight's the night to make that direction to staff.
We can wait till after the speaker if you have something. Okay. Councilmember Bill de la Pena.
Thank you. You mentioned tonight the second reading of the ordinance. That's something that happened already months ago. And that is something that I think could have been approved earlier, but because of circumstances, it wasn't. So the impact would be to the applicant, and that is a private developer, and I'm not sure whether that is something that I just wanted to point that out. I was not aware that I was informed that it was pulled because I had many questions, not because it...
Well, because Mr. Price couldn't vote this evening because he had to recuse himself, there wouldn't be enough votes for it to pass. So it's pulled to see if your questions could be answered.
Okay.
So that's why we didn't make a vote. But it is. I was just showing.
But you made it sound like it was pulled because we didn't have enough council members.
Well, you had to have a certain number of votes for it to pass.
Well, how many votes did you have to have?
You have to have 3. Affirmative votes.
Affirmative votes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Right.
that was. It doesn't. You can vote however you want. I'm just saying we're in a situation where we couldn't pass it this evening.
Okay.
All right. We have Mr. Ferris for questions only, or would you like to say something? Okay.
I was here just to answer questions regarding the initiative, but I did want to take the opportunity first to thank Linda Lawrence, Antoinette Mann, members of the City Clerk's Office and City Hall staff on assisting on getting the logistics of submitting the petitions in. And actually, I was out of town on the day we turned them in, so I'm very grateful for them hosting my wife and my daughter, who actually turned them in and sat with them and watched the count. And they were very good about providing me some information on how I could make their job easier to sort of segment things on numbers of signatures in 20 per petition, 19 per petition, 18. And we managed to come up with the same numbers on the first try, so that's great. And as she mentioned, 10,421 signatures, so fantastic. I'm glad they're being counted now, and hopefully that it'll be in front of you in a month for your election options. So I am here for any questions if you did have any regarding the initiative.
Any questions for Mr. Ferris? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ferris.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kidwai.
Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, Director concerned Cities of Thousand Oaks. To even be having such a discussion is such a disgrace for this great city and for the flag that stands in the corner. While the rest of the world marches to democracy, we have an Arab Spring. Here, we are not discussing giving Latinos the right to vote, or the people who just got the DREAM Act benefits to vote. It's actually giving the Thousand Oaks rednecks a chance to vote. It's all political, unfortunately. It's because we have an empty chamber that people are not participating that we live to see this day. What is the background that brings us here? It was basically wonderful council trying to save the citizens from having a 3-0 council. They knew that there was a colleague that was with terminal cancer. So they could not afford to risk democracy and have an election. I mean, I don't know where the attorneys are and where the people are that let these things happen and get by, and blame people like me that bring this up and show it the light of day. And there's no angels in this whole thing. The petition was ready. The vote was taken to appoint somebody with a chain of command mentality on Tuesday. And Thursday morning, the gentleman walked up with the petition. It was ready. The council, per your norms, have the right to bring 2 items on every council meeting. And the council member from any one of the sides, especially the one that supports the petition, should have put this on the agenda. We really don't need to have this discussion. I mean, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, 2012, not 1912. This is Thousand Oaks, not Memphis in 1938 or whatever. I urge the council to adopt the resolution as soon as possible, stop wasting time, stop the grandstanding, stop the politics, move on to the real business in these times when we are facing economic difficulty, and not force us. And in fact, I watched the guy get the signature. It was like so easy. I mean, something like that. I mean, this is a death knell for the mayor to seek re-election. I mean, you should really just use common sense and adopt this.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. We are on to, let's vote on this. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Fox?
Sure, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Comment to the motion?
Yeah, no, I'll approve staff recommendation with the caveat. It's superfluous of me to say, but I'll say it anyway for the record, that it be a balanced impact analysis. Thank you.
All right, vote please.
Motion carries 4-0.
Item 9C, amendment to exclusive refuse, recycling, and street sweeping franchise agreements. And Mr. Spurgeon will be presenting the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, everyone. This item was continued from the last council meeting, and at that meeting, staff presented a number of options for extending the existing solid waste franchise agreements. Now, recall that the commercial agreement that we have with Waste Management expires in 2015, and the two residential agreements, one with Waste Management and one with Harrison Newbury Disposal, those expire in 2018. So at the last council meeting, we provided 3 options to consider, and these were required to be something needed to be acted on by June 30 of 2012, which is the current extension point or decision point in the agreements. If no action were taken, the agreements would extend for 3 years with no changes. Council could choose to cancel the contracts and then go out for a competitive bidding option at the end of the agreements, or as we had recommended, that the 3-year extension be granted with negotiated price concessions and additional services. So what were those price concessions and services? 2 years of residential rate freezes were negotiated with the haulers, and a 3rd-year reduction in the increase. There was going to be free green waste disposal for our landscape operations at the Municipal Service Center, development of a commercial organics collection and recycling plan by Waste Management as part of their commercial contract. So at the last meeting, there were questions raised about how competitive our rates really were, and should we in fact put the contracts out to bid and see if and open them up for competitive bidding. So there was no action taken at the meeting, and council in fact directed staff to meet with the haulers to explore whether the concessions could be maintained even without the 3-year extension. So staff did meet with the haulers, and the answer to that question was no. Those concessions were negotiated as part of a 3-year extension. But as we discussed this with the haulers, we came up with a 4th option, and that's what we have to present to you tonight. The 4th option includes a thorough rate and service evaluation, which is really in response to the need for accurate information for you to have to make an informed decision. It's an important decision, obviously, whether or not we continue with our current haulers or open it up and potentially get new haulers in here. As we had reviewed information provided by the public at the last meeting, it became apparent that this kind of an analysis is very important. There were some numbers that didn't seem accurate to us. Although the city's rates compare very favorably in Ventura County, a number of the cities in LA County have much lower rates. But we asked ourselves, well, what's all in those rates? And are we really comparing apples to apples? And what we find is there's so many different variables involved in this, kind of like when we compare water rates. We need a certain amount of expertise and experience to do this. Obviously, in the 2 weeks we've had since the last meeting, staff isn't able to do that kind of an analysis. So what our 4th option is to do just that kind of a study, to hire an outside independent consultant that has this experience, have them do a thorough rate of evaluation. The haulers have agreed to pay for that evaluation, and then we would delay the decision point 1 year so that council is not required to make any decision at this time. That can be up till June 30 of 2013. In the meantime, the haulers have agreed to hold their concessions. The rate reductions for residential rates would freeze for this coming year. The green waste that's collected by our landscape maintenance crews would be collected at no cost to the city, and there would be the implementation plan developed for commercial organics recycling. Now, the contract expiration dates would not be extended. We're just talking about extending the decision point. And we really haven't lost any time, if you think about it, because the first contract that comes due is 3 years. And even if we waited a year to make a decision to go out to bid and do that kind of a competitive process, we still have plenty of time to do that. We believe this is a very good option, considering how important it is to make your decisions based on good information. This study would provide that. And the amendments that are included in the staff report provide for these, this option and these deal points. So be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Fox.
The first question, and even though I know the answer to this, that I think a lot of people would ask is, well, the haulers are paying for the evaluation to be done. Doesn't that kind of skew the results? I know that the city actually chooses through a whole process that they're basically paying the bill, but we're picking the consultant. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works, and that's consistent with how we operate in other issues where actually we have somebody else pay the fee, but we independently pick the consultant.
That is entirely accurate, Councilmember Fox. That occurs in so many different ways, developer EIRs and impact studies and whatnot. So yes, the city staff would be in charge of that consultant. We would independently go through a quick RFP process to select somebody. We'd be looking for that independent third-party review. And you're right, they would just be paying the bill.
All right. And then as part of that process, because I think one of the things that we're after, again, I'm going to say it again, what I said at the last council meeting, we're here not because of complaints over the service that the haulers are providing. In fact, I have not had a single complaint in all my years on the council, and I think the rest of my colleagues would basically say that. The haulers provide exemplary service, and they do it at what appears to be very competitive rates. That being said, we have not done the competitive bidding for many, many, many years, and it just for the sake of process, if for nothing else, it's a reasonable request that the city from time to time would do that. That being said, is it staff's intention to, if we move forward with this, to actually bring, for lack of a better definition, the parameters by which we're going to ask the consultant, and that council will have a chance to weigh in on exactly what we're asking the consultant to evaluate? Obviously, staff has some expertise in this area, but in this particular case, if you look at the kind of the spirit of why we're doing what we're doing, it seems to me council needs to kind of bless, so to speak, what we're asking the consultant. Because, I mean, the fact of the matter is, and I've seen it, I see it in Los Angeles, the city could sometimes be accused of this as well, is that the end result is predetermined, and then the consultant just validates what the governmental agency wants it to say. I want to do our best to be as transparent and open as we possibly can, and actually let the public weigh in a little bit on, here's what we'd like you to ask the consultant.
I appreciate that, and we can certainly bring back the final proposed scope of work to council for review. One of the other things we haven't done is we haven't done this type of thorough, detailed analysis for many, many years.
Right.
Every 3 years we come back with a negotiated, that we have been bringing back negotiated time extensions. We do a good analysis of our local rates and how we compare locally. But we really haven't reached out in this fashion. So I think this would be a very good exercise and good information. And
yeah,
it should
I agree.
Validate or not, our current rates.
Yeah, I think staff's come up with, and from my perspective, just really an outstanding option in this particular case. And at a minimum, the council's going to have more information. Again, as you point out correctly, time is really not an issue. And I think council's now in a better position with more information that we can fashion the questions to, if you will, that then it puts in a better position that if we do choose to go down that road, we're basing it on some data and some accurate information.
Mayor Pro Tem Bill de la Pena.
Thank you. My question was already answered because Mr. Fox asked that very question that was on my mind regarding the neutrality of it all. How neutral can it be if one party pays the entire report? But as you mentioned, that happens with projects, development projects on a regular basis, environmental impact reports. My question was actually no question, but a comment. I think that the recommendation that you came up with is actually a fair and elegant solution to the dilemma that we're currently having. So I think that is probably the way to go, and that is something that, not having heard yet from any of those speakers, that's just something that is looking encouraging or positive, to say the least. And I also want to say that I have, in my years on the council, not had a single report about complaints with trash service.
Councilmember Price.
Thank you. Mr. Spurgeon, just to clarify, in the amendment, I see here that Waste Management has agreed to pick up green waste from the Municipal Service Center, that is the green waste, and we had this conversation earlier today, and that's being done at the hauling rate of $1 per load. And I think the explanation was that was just for accounting, or for being able to count the number of loads. And I understand that. I just wanted to get that out in the public, and also to let them know that was just another way of showing just what these waste haulers do for the city. It's going to save the city, I think the figure is somewhere around $16,000. So.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, we have 3 speakers. Our first speaker is Mike Smith with Waste Management. Good evening, Mr. Smith.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Mike Smith, Waste Management. Certainly appreciate you putting us back on the agenda here. I really want to thank the staff for a great report. Appreciate you allowing us to meet with them and come up with this 4th option. I'd really like to say on behalf of all of our employees at Waste Management, and actually the Harrisons as well, since we're trying to consolidate this, is that we are all in support of staff's recommendation. We look forward to having a comprehensive study done so we could, actually probably learn something ourselves. So I'd like to thank you very much for that. And we also would like to say that we're just extremely proud, all of us at Waste Management and the Harrisons, of the services that we've been able to provide. After we sit here for hours and hours and listen and learn about the city, and to hear you say that you have no complaints is really a tribute to the employees that we have. We make millions of pickups per year, and we rely on our employees and the communication that we have with our managers and our employees and your staff to make it work in that fashion. So we appreciate the recognition on that. We appreciate what we've accomplished together, and we look forward to the next year and working through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Our next speaker is Rhonda Guthrie, and she will be followed by Tim Fry.
Good evening, Mayor Irwin, members of the council. My name is Rhonda Guthrie, and I'm here this evening on behalf of Crown Disposal. I first wanted to thank you for the detailed discussion at your last meeting regarding the need to go out to bid on your solid waste contracts. You all raised some very good points and asked some necessary questions about the terms and length of these contracts. As you know, and was stated again tonight, these contracts have never gone out to bid, yet you are being asked to grant extensions out to 2018 for your commercial contract and 2021 for your residential contracts. I believe it is time to rein in some control over these long ago executed contracts, and it sounds like that's the direction you're going tonight. This gives you the freedom and flexibility to look at these contracts in a new light and allow for a competitive bidding process. Tonight you are presented with another option, and that still in essence leaves the haulers in control of part of the contract for another year. It provides for a rate study paid for by the haulers, which will attempt to develop a comparison of rates and services. However, isn't a competitive bidding process the ultimate rate comparison study? An open and transparent RFP process will give you all of the answers you need regarding rates, services, recycling and diversion programs, and industry standards throughout Southern California. This is simply the good government thing to do and the absolute norm for solid waste contracts. Also, it is interesting to hear our competitors talk about being great partners with one another. Do TIA residents and businesses really benefit from this, or do we end up with the same high rates throughout all of Ventura County? For example, why wouldn't either one of the haulers also want this contract to be opened up so they could potentially benefit from additional business in Thousand Oaks? I would offer that competition better serves our communities and is the ultimate answer to all of the questions that have been raised throughout this process. I certainly appreciate the recommendation before you tonight and realize that it is a step in the right direction. You have the opportunity tonight to take control of these contracts and stop them from being extended out to 2018 and 2021. You gave a solid indication at your last meeting that going out to bid is the right thing to do, and I ask you to make that decision tonight. Thank you again for moving this discussion down the road, and I am hopeful that you will realize at the appropriate time that going out to bid and can only benefit the residents and businesses of Thousand Oaks.
Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. And our last speaker is Tim Fry.
Good evening, Mayor Irwin, members of council. I'm Tim Fry with Crown Disposal and also a Thousand Oaks resident. My comments, I think, will be more directed towards the last council meeting, where it really seemed that, based on the vote, that I think council, as Mrs. Guthrie had mentioned, made some really compelling arguments and comments about the need for transparency. I think, Mayor Irwin, you had referred to good government. I think Councilmember Fox, some of his comments were very compelling regarding his constituency. If he were to be approached by a constituent and ask, are we getting a good deal, whether you be a resident or a business owner, he didn't feel comfortable with his answer at that time. I think the appropriate thing, knowing that the history here where we haven't had a competitive bid process since 1973 seemingly, is the most responsible I guess undertaking is what we'd want to say, to make sure that we do have good government, good transparency, and the best services. I can tell you that through all the cities throughout Los Angeles that have gone out to bid, every one of them has gotten better services at better prices. And they've locked those services in for anywhere from a 7 to maybe a 10-year period. In Ventura County, we've kind of been, the market's pretty much been locked up between the two partners, as they say, with the exception of Santa Paula. And we were part of that bid process and applauded the city and staff in doing so, and we were the successful bidder. Since then, we're very proud of our accomplishments there, because we've taken a city that was on a local implementation plan through Cal Recycle. Their diversion rates were in trouble. They were at risk of fines, and we've been able to bring them up above the minimum threshold to over 60% hauler diversion through various programs, creative. And I'll get back to one point that's really important here. Competition is a great thing. Competition works. It serves your constituents well, me being one of them. I'd love to see it. And it makes all of us in this industry a lot more innovative, creative, and when we know we're competing with one another, then we just get better. And we're about good service. We're about providing the best service for the ratepayers at the best, most competitive prices, and providing the programs that will enable a city like Thousand Oaks, it's a very special city, to be able to achieve the highest quality of service and the highest diversion rates that are part of that service. So we've got some very aggressive thresholds statewide up into that 75% range that we need to meet, and the way we'll go about it is through some of these creative programs. And the competitive process allows for that. So I know you have a very capable staff. I'm sure when the process is conducted, they'll get the best deal for the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Questions of staff? Motion? Council member?
Thank you. For Mr. Spurgeon. I think the speakers actually do bring up a good point. when, hypothetically speaking, I don't know how the council will vote tonight, but if we were to go with this study, and obviously for the study, information needs to be collected, how open is this information available to actually compare apples to apples?
I think that's one of the reasons that you need the expertise and the experience from an independent firm to be able to do that. When you just go to, say, a website and you look up a rate, trash rate, for instance, and you pick that number, what does that mean? What's in that number? What's included? What are the services and so on? So, it'll take some time and some effort to do this, and again, that's why we have before you the recommendation to delay the decision point for a year. It gives us plenty of time. We should be able to come back in the spring with the results of the study and then have further discussion at that time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Price.
Thank you. I think that while the speakers have certainly made some good points, I think that this is a good first step toward getting a comparative rate analysis. If in the end it's decided that we may not be getting the best service for the and as Councilmember Fox said, a competitive price and not necessarily the best price, then I think we can revisit that. But I think that this is a good first step, and I credit the staff for coming up with this, and for the existing waste haulers for working with staff and coming up with this. And with that, I would make a motion to recommend staff's recommendation.
Comments to the motion. Councilmember Fox.
Thank you. When you boil it down, I think what we're moving towards is a process that we've used in the past, and ultimately what council's looking at is determining if the service that by all accounts is exemplary is competitive with other like services. And we do have testimony from arguably competitors who certainly have a business interest in competing for that contract, that has provided council with data that would tell you that there are better prices out there and they provide good services. And I think council needs to weigh that information based on the interest of the parties that are providing it to the council. I think the approach that we're taking tonight is allowing for a objective evaluation that council can set the parameters, council can select the like communities that we are comparing to, and we can ensure that the information that we get is as objective as it can be. And if it's not objective, then council has to look in the mirror, because we get to ask whatever we want. And based on that information, then we're in a position, as the speaker pointed out, that if we're asked by a constituent, is our waste hauling service at competitive prices, and is it the best service available, we're going to have the answer for them. Anecdotally, my answer right now is I know the service is outstanding. In terms of competitive price, the answer is we don't know. And I think by going through this evaluation process will put us several steps closer to being able to answer that question. So I'm certainly going to support the motion.
You have a comment to the motion? I'm also going to support the motion. I think the representatives from Crown do make a very good point that the ultimate comparison is to do an RFP, but we were in a situation that it's 7 years down the road before we would be picking anybody, and I think this is, we know that all these partners in Ventura County are doing an excellent job, and we don't lose anything by taking this year off. They have agreed to do this study, they've agreed to fund the study, and none of the end dates have changed. So this is really, I think, for the council, this is the optimal solution. And if in a year it looks like numbers are way off or they're not performing as well as we think they are, then at that point it's only 6 years till the end of the contract. So I think the staff and the haulers came up with a very good interim solution. Vote, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
Right, we are on item 10A, Committee, Commission, and Board reports. Councilmember Price.
Yes, thank you. My iPad is down momentarily, so I think I know what that is. And, I had the opportunity to serve on the Traffic and Transportation Commission alongside of Commissioner Rick Lemo, and he has served admirably in that position for a number of years. And with that, I would recommend that he be appointed or reappointed to the commission to continue his service as the former council member Gillette wished.
Vote, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
City Council as successor agency to redevelopment agency reports. There are none. Council issues and recommendations. Follow-up reports on meetings and conferences attended by council members. I attended the League of California Cities Public Safety Committee in Sacramento, and there was some discussion on the public safety ballot measures, the death penalty, repeal, human trafficking, and 3 strikes. It's all in the report. The most interesting thing is, or I should say disturbing thing, is with alignment, there is a $20 million grant formula for distribution to cities to deal with the negative consequences of realignment. And for some reason, that grant funding is only available to cities that have their own police departments, not cities that contract with the sheriff. So Sacramento has somehow pitted cities that use police sheriff contracting against cities with their own police departments. So Mina Leyva is fighting the good fight to try and get that issue resolved. She said she met today with the sheriff and the assistant sheriff, and hopefully we can get a fair resolution on that. We're scratching for every penny. And so my recommendation is to receive the report. Vote, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
Right, and City Manager reports.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, first off on the state budget update, Mina Leyva, our Legislative Affairs Manager, has been watching through the night the discussions of the various trailer bills on the state budget. The one that we were zeroing in on was the proposal to allow cities with redevelopment, formerly had redevelopment agencies, to retain their bond proceeds. For us, that would be upwards of $20 million for various projects that benefit the school district and our public infrastructure. So that has not been acted on tonight, and according to the latest notes here from Mina Leyva, that will be picked up tomorrow. Some of the trailer bills, AB 1484 and SB 1024, they attempt to give the State Department of Finance a lot more authority to go through and take local property taxes and so on associated with redevelopment. And some of these have been very draconian to school districts. We've heard from our local school district today. They're very concerned about their pass-through monies being reduced. It's very complicated right now, but we're keeping an eye on it. We're working with the school district and so on. Also, related to the state budget and to comply with AB 1234, the Mayor Jackie Irwin, and myself did go with 5 other cities with their elected officials and city managers and or staff, and met with a number of senators and assembly members last week, including Assembly Member Doss Williams, who represents Santa Barbara County and a little sliver of Ventura County on AB 1778. This is the proposal to further restrict TDA funds for cities And we heard a little discussion about this earlier tonight. The meetings were very, we feel, effective in terms of conveying the wishes of the cities of this county. Not a single city in the county has endorsed this bill, which would have significant impacts. And for the city of Thousand Oaks, our TDA funds, Transit Development Act funds, that we receive, we used to spend, I'm looking at Mark, about 3/4 of it on streets and roads. We used to spend $3 to $4 million a year on streets and roads and a little bit on transit. And over the last several years, we reversed that ratio. We're now spending about $3 million or so on transit and about a little less than $1 million on streets and roads. So we're adhering to the spirit of that, and we have long wanted to work more cooperatively with the other cities in East County to have a regional bus system. In fact, one of your colleagues, Councilmember Dennis, a retired Councilmember Dennis Gillette, has indeed been advocating for this for many years. We think we now have the attention of our other cities in the East County, and we're hopeful that we can move in that direction. So we had those meetings, and we were with 6 cities. So that's it by way of state budget comments, and follow-up from comments on other items earlier tonight. One clarification on the city's budget. There was questions about use of reserves. Our policies allow us to use reserves primarily for capital improvements, and we do that a little bit with the general fund. And then when the general fund did provide the use of reserves for the theaters fund for maintenance of the facilities. So just for that clarification, we do not use reserves for recurring operations. Okay, the next council meeting will be July 10th, and at this point in time, we're looking at 2 public hearings, one dealing with the Jan's Marketplace, an existing assessment district that it has for the parking structure and other related improvements. The private property owners are interested in doing a refunding or a refinancing, if you will, and that's been before council. So we may have that hearing on July 10th. The other hearing that we're looking at has to do with the County of Los Angeles, for whom we contract for animal control services, some minor cleanup changes to that contract and so on, and that'll be before the council. So that's it. Thank you.
Council member?
I just have a question about, is there going to be a separate agenda item for, speaking of transportation, regarding the Tiger Grant? Or is that?
No.
No. Okay.
In terms of our application was not acted on, or? Yeah, that was denied. We did share that with council. If there's I don't know what we would come back to the council with, so, okay.
Yeah, typically what we've done in the past is we've just included a brief memo in council mail that the results of the Tiger Grants were out, and we weren't successful. We don't agendize it in any fashion.
All right, and we are now going to adjourn to our regular meeting on July 10th, 2012. Good night, everybody.